Chapter 957. Duque's voice was very soft. Apart from him and Archimonde, no one else heard him at all. The old comrades who knew Duque didn't understand why Duque would be captured, but the heroes who didn't know Duque were so scared that their faces turned green. The Night Elves and the Horde knew that the link between the three factions was Duque. Duque was the planner, and Duque was the commander. Duque was the key figure in the Battle of Mount Hyjal. If he died soon after the battle started, the battle would be over. On the other side, Tyrande was ready to use her ultimate move. Before she could activate Starfall, the Horde moved faster. Thrall had just given him a look, and Lord Howl's signature jump slash was used. Grom Hellroar raised Bloodhowl high, ready to cut off Archimonde's fingers to save him. The next second, Grom's face darkened, because he only jumped halfway when he saw another Duque. More than one person noticed that Duque was actually holding Sylvanas' slender legs with one hand, and letting her sit on his shoulder. His other hand was holding Jaina's slender waist, and he floated down with slow fall. Well, there was also a hand of magic holding a cursing dwarf upside down. The reason for this was that Archimonde's powerful curse, Grasp of Army, was a little troublesome for a Radiant Moon Mage to remove. Duque could instantly remove it, so he did it in passing. The Duque caught by Ak was of course a clone. The problem was that the bitter Grom didn't know. In midair, Lord Howl and Duque made silent eye contact. First, a pair of crimson eyes the size of a bull's stared at Duque. "That's your phantom clone? Why didn't you say so earlier?" Duque returned an innocent look. "You didn't ask?" Grom's eyes widened even more bitterly. "Damn it. I was thinking of repaying you for saving my life. I jumped for nothing. Oh no, I'm jumping. With such a big mistake, I would die in minutes against this kind of person." Duke rolled his eyes. "Done. He doesn't have time to deal with you." Lord Roar immediately knew why. Ah! Archimonde's sudden scream almost broke everyone's eardrums. Everyone could hear the fury in the demon commander's scream, because a golden holy light was bursting out from his clenched right hand. At first, it only leaked through the gaps between the fingers, but in less than a tenth of a second, it concentrated on the knuckle of the middle finger closest to the palm. Time seemed to freeze in the next second. The huge cyan middle finger that was thicker than a bucket was perfectly cut off. The incision perfectly followed the shape of the joint. Strictly speaking, only the muscles and skin were cut off. But a severed finger was a severed finger. 10 fingers are connected to the heart. This saying is not nonsense. That kind of heart-wrenching pain made Archimonde go crazy. Wah! Accompanied by the roar, the surrounding space began to tremble. The terrifying aura that flowed out from the demon commander actually caused the entire ground to shake. Even the wooden pillars of the houses that had yet to collapse 1,000 meters away creaked and swayed, causing sawdust and dust to fall. At the same time, a terrifying pressure that made people shudder spread out in all directions. This was not a simple pressure. The reason why Archimonde was known as the Burning Dusk, the creator of Purgatory, and the Defiler was not without reason. At this moment, many terrifying illusions involuntarily appeared in the minds of every hero who besieged Archimonde. These were not illusions that were fabricated out of thin air. All the illusions came from the worlds that Archimonde conquered and destroyed. They came from the residual pain of every victim at the last moment of their lives. They came from the desperate cries of their souls when they were forced to fall after being captured. It wasn't just one or two voices, but the shock formed by the convergence of thousands of despair and resentment. Archimonde used this most ferocious martial merit that belonged to him to make the most terrifying weapon. In this way, he displayed his reputation as a demon commander. The closer they were, the more they bore the brunt of the attack. Lord Howl was shocked and fell on the spot. The Tauren chief Kane, who was holding the totem pole, had a pale brown face and cold sweat dripping from his forehead. His pair of big bull eyes were lifeless, and it was obvious that he had lost his focus. Kane, who had clearly stopped moving, was kicked by Ak. His huge body rolled a few times and fell into the fire of destruction, rolling around in pain. However, the damage of the flames instantly matched the purgatory in his illusion. He fell deeper into the illusion of fear. If it wasn't for a large pile of snow falling from the sky and smashing into his head, causing him to wake up from his hallucination with a quiver, perhaps his injuries wouldn't be as simple as this. Cain subconsciously looked at the spellcaster. He was a little dazed. In theory, Duque, who had saved him, was still in a state of fear. What the hell is this? Of course, Cain didn't know that Duque had been hit by fear, and that the system elf had helped him. At a time like this, it was definitely a different matter. Unable to care so much, Cain spat out a mouthful of blood on the ground and rushed forward on the spot. While he was in a daze, Mograine and Turalian, who had stronger wills, resisted the fear, this time and held Archimonde back. After all, there were only a few who could resist the fear or wake up early. There was Kale, that's who cried out in fear, Caponia, who ran around out of control and crawled even when she fell, and Thrall, who waved his weapon in an attempt to fight against the illusory enemy. In Jaina's mind, she saw countless pitch-black enemies baring their fangs and brandishing their claws. They broke into the palace where she had lived since she was young, reached out to tear apart her gorgeous robe, and scratched her tender skin. No. 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 She tried to open her eyes, but no matter how hard she tried, she couldn't. All she could see was darkness. Her seemingly strong heart was filled with frailty and helplessness. Jaina felt like she was a lone boat on a stormy sea, about to capsize at any moment and succumb to the boundless fear. When a person was in extreme fear, the most natural thing to do was to look for a life-saving straw. Even though the feeling was very weak, Jaina clearly felt that she had been hugging something. At first it was a little blurry, but she soon realized what she was hugging. It was Duque. That's right. Duque. The man she was destined to be unable to break free from his hands. The man she would unknowingly get involved with even after the engagement was broken off. Countless times, she had thought that breaking free from the shackles of the strongest hero of humanity was a form of release. However, in the face of such a great enemy, in the face of unimaginable terror, Jaina suddenly felt that having a man to shelter her from the wind and rain, and give her a sense of security, was an incomparably happy thing. Chapter 958. The feeling became clearer and clearer. The demonic claws around her still made her tremble with fear, but the warmth from her left and the beating of her heart clearly told her that it was Jaina. The person who can protect you is right beside you. The throbbing in her heart grew more and more excited. It was the impact of breaking through the restraints of fear and nightmares, breaking free from all oppression. This was the final and most perfect redemption in the apocalypse. Filled with immeasurable excitement, Jaina finally lifted her long, curly eyelashes and opened her eyes. Duque. Duque. Two completely different voices called out the same name. Two faces with different styles were filled with the same excitement. It was a pity that the first thing they saw was not the young and handsome face they imagined, but each other as enemies. That's right. Unbeknownst to them, Duque had already changed his posture, and was now hugging Queen Sylvanas' waist. As a result, the first thing the two queens saw when they opened their eyes was not Duque, but their rival in love. Very, very much. They snorted and vented the anger in their hearts, but when they saw Duque's dog eyes looking here and there, they did not know whether to look at Sylvanas on the left or Jaina on the right. The two queens burst into laughter at the same time. Still fighting over this at a time like this, the two competitive and smart women read the words in each other's eyes at the same time. It was a temporary truce and worked together to get rid of Archaerans. Seeing that they were falling from the sky and about to hit the ground, the two queens, Queen Sylvanas and Jaina, pushed away lightly at lightning speed and pulled away from Duque in order to prevent the three of them from becoming a target. Only Dooku was left. He did not understand why the two of them were angry first and then laughing. Duque could not be bothered with these personal matters for now. Archaeron's widespread fear caused many powerhouses to rush into the River of Flames in a state of fear. Other than Cain, Lilith, Caponia, Brock, and even Tyrande were affected. How could the destructive flame from the Burning Legion's Big Three be so easy to deal with? Even though Duque had gathered a large amount of frost elements and extinguished the flames on their bodies with a high concentration of frost aura, everyone still had large areas of burns on their bodies. Without any hesitation, Malfurion launched his ultimate move. He opened his arms, palms and face to the sky, and chanted. An overflowing feeling of spring instantly filled the entire space within a radius of 1,000 meters. The sky was full of twinkling stars, and the dazzling brilliance flickered ceaselessly along with the growth of all living things. Every injured expert felt a vigorous life force growing endlessly in their bodies. Ah! Lilith looked at her burned left arm in disbelief. After a sudden itch, the entire scab fell off, revealing new tender skin. Although Tyrant had expected this outcome, she still watched with satisfaction as her charred calf returned to its original state. She wasn't the only one. The white tiger beneath her shook off its burnt fur as it ran, and a large clump of fresher white fur grew out. That's right. This was the druid's ultimate move, Tranquility. When used by a druid like Malfurion, he would definitely be able to pull you back from the brink of death even if you were on the brink of death. You would be able to jump around in no time. Well done. Thanks. Impressive. They spoke in different languages but conveyed the same meaning. Although he was a little exhausted after using his ultimate move, Malfurion still smiled. However, the wiser experts such as Duque, Wajin, and Thrall all felt gloomy. No one knew when the next mass fear and destructive flame would come. If it came again with the curse of Army's grasp or air explosion, even the thickest of champions would be in danger. Obviously, Malfurion's ultimate move could not be used at any time. In order to recover, he had already started to use rejuvenation and other small moves. On the other hand, Archimonde, who had lost his middle finger, was a little angry. Although as a powerful demon, his broken finger could be regenerated, the strength of his body was always inversely proportional to the difficulty of regeneration. Even for him, it would take a lot of effort to regrow his middle finger. Moreover, the effect of the combo just now was far from satisfactory. The commander of the Burning Legion probably did not expect that there would be a team that could survive under his terrifying combo. In his heart, he could not help but raise the level of Duque, and the others from the level of ants to the level of beasts. The agile champions below annoyed Archimonde, so he picked the Tauren chief who was the only one who was willing to face him head-on. He roared, and his voice was like thunder from the 9 heavens. Filthy beast, kneel. A giant hoof stomped on Kane's head. The huge difference in size was often accompanied by an absolute difference in weight. In a head-on confrontation, this was the difference between heaven and earth. The weight that mortals could not bear was on Kane's head. Although he gritted his teeth and held the totem pole high, the heavy pressure like a falling mountain still made his body short, and his knees could not help but slowly bend. Ha ha. Ha 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 ha. In order to not let the troublesome fellows stop him, Archimonde directly used air explosion on his feet. The first to be blown away were the orc heroes. Then it was the humans. Even though Mograine and Turalyon had stabbed their holy swords into the ground to prevent themselves from being blown away, the 2 holy knights were still blown away when the ground was shattered. Although it was not far, it was a fatal gap. Seeing that no one could come close, Archimonde sinisterly released fire of destruction under his feet again. Although he had the physique of a giant and incomparable strength, he was still an Eridar warlock. Close combat and whatnot were all sideshows in between casting spells. Yes. He wanted to burn the only person who dared to face him head-on, Old Bull, to death in front of this group of rebels. He finally understood that as long as the annoying Kane was no longer at the front, the others would not be able to withstand his strength. The rest of the people couldn't withstand his strength at all. He could chase them around like ducks and finally kill them one by one. Just as a ferocious expression appeared on his face, and he was ready to quietly wait for the screams to come from under his feet, the fire under his feet was suddenly blown away. The next moment he felt a sharp pain from his feet. He saw that a large chunk of his right toe had flown out of his right hoof. A voice that he deeply hated sounded again. "You bastard, I will make it so that you will never be able to step on anyone again." Chapter 959. Originally, when he saw the surrounding flames spreading towards him, Kane had already lost all hope. It was purely the glory of a warrior that supported him. Apart from him, no other hero of the 3 sects could contend with Archimonde's strength as a giant. As long as they changed from a positional battle to a pursuit battle, the damage output of any mage would be reduced by at least 40%. Yet in the entire team, there were the most mages. Kane could not retreat, and he could not retreat under the heavy pressure. Then a miracle happened. Colorless wind blades brushed past his feet, and for a moment, Cain thought that his hooves were going to be cut off. With his perception of the power of nature, he immediately discovered that those wind blades came from Duque. Cain did not understand what was going on. He only knew that Duque's wind blades had scooped up all the grass and turf in one breath, rolled them into a ball in midair, and exploded them. Then the surrounding flames were all gone, leaving only the black soil that emitted the smell of burning. It wasn't just Ak. The other mages were all stunned. No one could have imagined that such a method could be used to deal with those annoying flames of destruction. Kale, that was the first to understand. He pushed out with one hand before the fire burned him, using magic to lift the entire turf. Then, the moment before the flames of destruction burned him, he used magic to push the flames and the scorched turf away. The long river of flames was changed just like that. I understand. Jaina and Ronan shouted in surprise at the same time. No one who could reach the radiant moon Pharaoh was a fool. Flames were never something that could exist out of thin air. Any flame had to have a combustible object as a support. Either it could be ignited vegetation, or it could be a flammable gas in midair. Even though it was very difficult to use frost elements to fight against this demigod-level flame, as long as he pushed the flame away, he could change the course of the entire river of flames and keep himself and his teammates away from danger. Duque had invented this move. To Cain, he was just a pretty good teammate. He was still far from being a god-level teammate. Duque's next strike magnified Duque's image in his heart. If Duque had used a sneak attack to cut off one of Archimonde's fingers, no one could see it clearly. Now at least Cain could see it clearly. It was an extremely thin and long sword. To the Tauren, it was like a long needle. It was clearly so thin that it was not suitable to be used as a weapon. He could not miss out on the golden holy light that blossomed from it. In fact, Archaron's had already reacted when he sensed the holy light that had injured him. He cried out in alarm. Just as he was about to raise his hoof, space seemed to be strangely distorted. On the tip of the right leaf-shaped hoof of the demon's hoof, a thin golden line that was almost identical to the one before suddenly appeared. Unlike how a butcher dissected an ox, Duque used the most violent method to cut off the incomparably thick and tough hoof, using the maximum output of the holy sword to chop off the horny layer on the hoof. If Archaron's body had not been weakened by the Night Elf's Emerald Dream's ultimate move, Duque's strike would have been in vain. But there were not so many ifs in the world. As soon as the thin golden line appeared, it extended to both sides at high speed. The next moment, accompanied by intense pain, Archaron saw his toe break in the middle. The black finger that was as large as the roof of a house flew out with a crack. It spun continuously in the air before crashing onto the black soil 10 meters away. Time seemed to have stopped at that moment. The demon commander's face was full of horror. He screamed, "No!" If he had lost his finger, it could be said that he had been careless and fell for Duque's trick. However, the forceful counterattack this time made him fully realize that he, who had been weakened twice by the magic circle of planet Azeroth and the magic circle of Mount Hyjal, was much weaker than he had imagined. Bastard! 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 Archaron's roared and launched a wild attack. Just now, if he had continued to stomp with all his strength, he might have been able to find Cain for revenge. It was a pity that his toe had been cut off. This affected him too much. If he had been injured in the arm or body, it would at most affect his attack power. But the foot was the most troublesome limb. After losing a toe, Ak felt that his balance was obviously out of whack. This was a very dangerous sign. He had leg armor. The golden demon armor, forged by the Burning Legion's dark craftsman with the highest craftsmanship, protected his calf very well. And in his impression, there had never been anything that could hurt his incomparably thick and hard hooves. Now it was different. If he could not support his body and fell, then the melee professionals who had been besieging his calf would be able to attack his vitals more directly. Then there was a real possibility that he would die here. Archaron's brought out his real skills. 10 fingers, oh, it was now 9 fingers in a row. The air blast, that had a gap just now suddenly became a continuous barrage. Although the air blast, with a wide range, had become the air cannon, with a narrower attack area, its power had more than doubled. Boom. There was a loud noise, and grass and sand flew all over the sky. Many experts, including Duque, saw Brock's right arm suddenly twist in an extremely awkward position that shouldn't have appeared. If not for the flesh still attached, everyone would have thought that his entire arm had fallen off his shoulder. It wasn't just his arm. After he was accidentally hit by the air cannon, his whole body spun and crashed into a huge stone monument not far away. Brock, Thrall exclaimed. Unexpectedly, a fire phoenix that was not much bigger than Tyron's white tiger flashed past, its claws seemingly made of flames, saving Brock unscathed. He was saved, but Brock had clearly lost the ability to fight. Dislocations and sprains were the most troublesome. If it was just a simple injury, recovery spells could quickly heal the wound. If the limb was twisted or had a comminuted fracture, the broken bone near the wound had to be cleared first so that the bones could be placed in the right position before the spell could be cast. Otherwise, the bones would become crooked and the arm would be crippled. His eyes fierce, Duque dragged Brock away from the battlefield with Hand of Magic and shouted, "It's better to break one than to injure 10 fingers." Mograine and Turayan immediately understood what he meant. In the next moment, with Thrall's help, Mograine shot toward Archeron's lower back like a cannonball. Chapter 960. As a powerhouse who always charged at the front lines, how could he not know that there were only 3 people who could truly threaten him after exchanging a few blows? 2 large holy swords in the open, as well as that orc who jumped up for some reason and was sent flying. Alright, I'll ignore that. Lastly, there's Duke, who looks like a mage, but is actually an assassin. Yes, Duke Marcus. This was not the first time Archimonde had heard this name. While he did not care about it before, ever since Duque cut off his first finger, he was destined to engrave this name in his heart. He had already decided to imprison Duque's soul under his burning throne, and let him suffer endless torture for tens of thousands of years. Unfortunately, before that, he had to face the threat behind him. Archimonde's huge body twisted violently, and his left fist smashed towards Mograine behind him. In midair, Mograine should not have been able to borrow any strength, but at that moment, a mass of arcane energy appeared out of thin air. With a light push from beneath Mograine's battle boots, the incredibly heavy Mograine was able to complete a double jump that not even professionals could do. Even Newton's coffin couldn't hold him down anymore. Cough cough. It was this jump that caused Mograine's threat level to skyrocket. Originally, he could only aim for Archimonde's waist, but now he was going for his neck. Without thinking, he changed his attack. His left fist that was originally sweeping horizontally turned into an uppercut. At that moment, 3 arrows arrived. Tyrande, who had been hiding her true strength, finally revealed her true abilities. Once Fortify Aura was activated, the power of the Windrunner sisters' arrows increased exponentially. Their arrows, which were originally like mosquito bites to Archimonde, were instantly raised to the level of All's. Lilith's Wind Arrow was the first to arrive, activating Archimonde's tough skin resistance against natural attacks. Who knew that in the next instant, it would be Lightning Arrow, followed by Flame Arrow. 3 arrows in a row, almost hitting the same spot in unison. The last arrow broke through his defense and pierced deep into the joint of his left hand. Every creature's joints were extremely sensitive. Normally, a swollen joint would cause it to be unable to bend or anything, let alone a needle-like arrow. Ak froze on the spot. Die! Mograine roared, and the wide Ashbringer swung down at high speed. Surging holy light rippled in the air, forming a loud sound similar to a sonic boom. You're the one who will die. Archaron's finally revealed his trump card. It was a skill that did not exist in any version of history. His eyes suddenly turned bright red, and then shot out a crimson ray similar to the kinetic death ray. Duque was tongue-tied. For a moment, he almost suspected that Ultraman had gone to the wrong set. Mograine was hit right in the bullseye. Just when everyone thought that Mograine was dead for sure, they saw a dull golden light pierce through the crimson pillar of light and fall lightly. Save them! Grom, who had the best jumping ability, caught Mograine in one leap. This time, not only did he fail, but he also wasted a lot of Mograine's stamina and energy. This was not a good thing. Although it seemed that as long as one was devout enough, holy light could be cast endlessly. In fact, holy light was a type of spiritual power, which was closely related to a person's willpower and stamina. It is impossible for a weary, exhausted person to have much willpower. Fortunately, the real killer move was never Mograine. Not only did Duque activate Flash, but Turalyon also arrived. The two holy swords of the same lineage shone at the same time, and cut the heel of Archeron's right hoof. From the beginning to the end, Duque and the other's goal was to pick off the tendons. The two divine swords from the Pantheon were attacking together for the same goal. The light they emitted was even more blinding than the brightest sunlight. Ignoring the fact that the power that wrapped around Archerons began to dissipate in fear, even the other members of the heroes group couldn't help but turn around, not daring to look at the blinding light. This blow almost cut off the soul of the demon commander's foot. If it wasn't for a strange and terrifying intuition that enveloped Duque and Turalyon, forcing them to stop, this matter would probably have succeeded. Even so, Quell Zarim succeeded in cutting off the tendons at the heel, and continued the cut to the ankle. In severe pain, Archerons fell to the ground. At this time, he finally realized that his huge body was not an advantage, but his most fatal weakness. He had to do something. Just as Grom was about to jump up and give Ak another hard blow, something that Duque had never expected happened. F***CK, Archerons actually had a second transformation. The first time he was hit by the ultimate move of the Emerald Dream, Archerons was forced to shrink. This time, he took the initiative to shrink. Although he was not that small, after using a ring-shaped wave of darkness to force away the melee heroes that surrounded him, he was still a giant standing in front of the heroes. However, his height was halved, and he was only 7 meters tall. Haha. Let's do it again. I'll make this guy shorter than me. Old Bull laughed and charged forward. Then he courted death. Everyone imagined that Archerons would definitely change. However, no one expected it to turn out like this. Old Bull went up. Old Bull rolled back. He had used all his strength and even the power of Mother Earth. But in the end, the Old Bull was slapped in the face. He did not die. Taurens were famous for their strong vitality, and most of them believed in Brother Spring. However, as Old Bull vomited blood, his face was filled with confusion. The most obvious thing about the shrunken Archerons was that he had changed his appearance. He originally looked like a gladiator, but now he had a cape and a skeleton scepter that emitted an evil and ominous aura. The scepter was actually more than a meter long, but in the hands of the 7-meter-tall Archerons, it looked like a short hammer. He was even shorter, so in theory it should be easier to deal with. The warrior heroes, who were originally like dwarfs and could not reach Archerons' vitals even if they jumped up, had grave expressions on their faces. Duque suddenly understood why. Even though Ak was very tall just now, he only gave them the feeling of a tall building. Tall buildings could collapse, but mountains could not. Right now, Archerons was like a miniature mountain. Chapter 961. Duque had transmigrated, greatly altered history, and lifted the skirt of the goddess of fate. Just when he thought he could conquer fate, he was shocked to find that he was also being teased by the goddess of fate. Speaking of which, if the world of Azeroth was a person, then most of his physics knowledge was taught by his physical education teacher. A dragon could become a person, and then the extra dozens of tons of mass would disappear. Archimonde, who had shrunk to one size, was the best example. The current Archimonde gave off a more stable feeling, but his movements were more light and agile. Duque sent a clone directly behind Archimonde, and then everyone only saw Archimonde sneer, and Duque's clone silently annihilated in a round shield. Duque's pupils suddenly shrank. Big trouble. After Archimonde shrank, not only did his strength double, but it seemed that even his magic resistance had increased a lot. Archimonde calmly sneered loudly. Rejoice! Rejoice! You ants! You should be happy that in the past 10,000 years, for the first time, someone has forced me to use my most basic form. Although I've always yearned to be a god of war who charges at the front, I'm still a warlock. No matter how powerful his magic was, he was still afraid of a kitchen knife. In theory, that was the case. Thrall was the third to not believe it, and he threw his hammer again. Bang! This time, the hammer of destruction was directly hit by a blue shield bullet. Finally, someone lost his voice. Is Archimonde invincible? Duque disdained this kind of nonsense. Glancing over, he found that it was Kale, that's little Miss Caponia, who spoke, and Duque was annoyed. Fortunately, Kale, that said something fair. Impossible. There is absolutely no perfect and invincible existence in this world. Ha ha ha. I am perfect. I am the strongest. I am invincible. Archimond's wild laughter came instantly. Duque was annoyed when he heard this. F***ck, F***ck, F***ck. What happened to being a big guy and being happily beaten to death by a group? Why did you change the script without permission? By the way, with your high magic resistance, will the other Radiant Moon mages still be able to play around? Moreover, Warlock's new martial arts. Old Cow would not be able to withstand it. Duque secretly ordered in his mind. System, analyze the weakness. 3 seconds later, Duque suddenly laughed shamelessly. Archimond, before you pretend to be invincible, can you not limp first? Archiron's final appearance was too shocking. As soon as he appeared, he sent Old Cow flying and even melted Duque's clone. This shocked the group of experts. Following Duque's words, everyone suddenly realized that Archaron's, who seemed to have greatly strengthened himself, did not heal his own injuries. The broken middle finger was still oozing purplish-blue blood. His right leg, which had a small part of his hoof and a broken hamstring, was still limping. Even though he could use his willpower to ignore the existence of the pain, the faint remnants of golden holy light around the wound seemed to be telling everyone. This is the target. Aim here. He couldn't help but burst into laughter. Ha 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 ha. This is too funny. I've seen bragging, but I've never seen someone so good at bragging. Does the Burning Legion rely on bragging to determine their status? Led by Shorty, who had the least sense of propriety, they started scolding Archimond in a multilingual manner. Heroes from all walks of life immediately turned into Internet Water Army keyboard warriors, scolding Archimond until he was black and blue. Just as everyone was laughing wildly, Duque's whisper of the wind sounded in everyone's ears. Everyone, please pay attention to the color of Archiron's light shield. If I'm not wrong, red is the Hellhound mode, which mainly increases magic resistance. Yellow should be the Doomguard, which increases strength and attack power. Originally, they had to pay the price of blood to try to deal with it, but with Duque's familiarity with warlocks and the system Elf's abnormal analysis, Archiron's possible changes were almost impossible to hide. With such amazing information, wouldn't everyone be able to fight the tycoons? Distribute the land? Oh no, it should be fight the boss and distribute the equipment. Hee. Very quickly, especially the orcs, everyone started to smile with ill intentions. It was as if, like sharks smelling the scent of blood, everyone gathered together again. The great Archaron's, am really being looked down upon. With that, Ak raised his left hand, and a large meteor rain fell from the sky, crashing onto the ground around him. Not only that, with a sweep of his right hand, a river of flames made of fire of destruction, first moved to the left and then to the right, blocking in front of the heroes. Logically speaking, it should be the melee classes dodging, but who would have thought that the melee classes would roar and charge across the river of flames, directly reaching the other side of victory, and start attacking Archimond with their weapons. It wasn't that they were crazy, but that Malfurion and the other healers were desperately supporting them. Almost every melee hero had the Great Druid's powerful continuous HP recovery spells. Heal, and Rejuvenation. Those who were more seriously injured could even enjoy the more powerful Swift Heal, or Life Bloom. What? Archaron's couldn't hide the shock on his face. In the next moment, he directly activated Fear. The fear magic that had destroyed countless planets and plunged countless races into despair and nightmares became ineffective after the warriors uniformly activated Furious Fury, which could resist the fear effect. No, it wasn't just the warriors. Benedict also gave Turayan a protection fear barrier. In the past, the scene of everyone being hit by fear and running around like blind flies was gone. At the very least, the three warriors, Cain, Lord Howl, and Thrall, along with Turayan, were chasing Archaron's and slashing at him. If it was any other time, everyone would have thought that they had taken the wrong medicine. But at this moment, The horror on Ack's face was the best contrast to their bloodthirsty and ferocious expressions. That's impossible. Archaerans cried out. Haha, idiot. We've already seen through your trick. Cain laughed out loud. He shouldered the raging flames and charged forward, sweeping his pillar strike horizontally. As if to prove how right Old Cow's cheap laughter was, the scene of the disparity in strength seemed to have been reversed. Bang! A dull thud rang out. Archaerans was like a little wife who had been slapped by domestic violence, and could only cry in the corner. He fell on his butt. Almost at the same time, the three muscular men leaped up and slashed at Archaerans. Chapter 962. A few seconds of fear passed in the blink of an eye. Every hero who had recovered from their fear watched in shock, as the four macho men chased after the battered and exhausted Archimonde. He was not pretending to be in a sorry state, but he was really in a sorry state. His rather large body was more like a target. It seemed that Archaerans had rolled on the ground at least twice. Why was this happening? Obviously, it had something to do with Duque's order to warriors, attack with all your might. The fierce men were having fun slashing at him. Turalyon, who was the most stable, cut off a few pieces of meat from the great demon's right calf, and decided to carry out the plan of crippling his leg first. Thrall was not careless either. He cooperated with Turalyon and left a square-headed burn mark on Ack's right calf. Cain was the most unscrupulous. He picked up a pillar and smashed it at Ack's waist. It did not seem like the result was obvious, but it was actually a cover for Grom, who was the most violent, to slash at Ack's face with Blood Roar. Master Roar had a good time slashing. He did not hold back at all when faced with Archaerans, who could only raise his arms to defend. With a few slashes, he left a few huge wounds on Ack's arm that were so deep that bones could be seen and blood gushed out. Just as they were slashing, Duque's voice rang out again. Retreat. Without hesitation, as if they were minions who had shouted, Run for your lives. Three of the four macho men who were still slashing fiercely a moment ago suddenly scattered in all directions. They ran so fast, unwilling to stay where they were. Only the thick-skinned old bull squatted on the spot, and snorted at Archaerans with an infuriating expression. He was clearly saying, Come on. Let's hurt each other. Just as the fierce men completed their transformation, the light barrier on Archaeron's body switched to a khaki color. Blazing magic radiance lit up in all directions at the same time. Ronan, Caponia, and Solarian worked together to create an arcane light ball that was too huge and far beyond the scope of a missile. Looking at the rising purplish-blue mushroom cloud, perhaps it would be more appropriate to call it arcane nuclear bomb. Before the arcane wave dissipated, Kale, Bats and Jaina each blasted out a phoenix. Fire Phoenix, Prairie Fire. Phoenix, Absolute Windstorm. The two principles were the same, but the elements used were worlds apart. One used ice to freeze Archimonde's upper body, while the other used flames to roast Ack's lower body. This allowed the commander of the Burning Legion to enjoy a clash of ice and fire. Meanwhile, Duque's Frostfire Apocalypse, which had condensed almost half of his Breaking Dawn mana, turned into a huge spiral and sent Archaerans flying. It was a high fly ball that traveled 200 yards straight to the outfield. Cough cough. He was wrong. That was the dark history of the Burning Legion's commander, who had been brutally blasted dozens of meters away like a piece of trash. Archimonde's body was still considered huge, but in front of a group of ants, he was like a dog eating shit. He struggled to get up, only to discover that he was once again surrounded by the ants he had looked down upon half an hour ago. Damn it! Damn it! Damn it! Archimonde had been growing his middle finger, but now he really wished he could grow a few more middle fingers to point at Duque. Archimonde's tragic situation was in stark contrast to the calm smile on Duque's face. Everyone, do you remember? The dark blue shield is for defense in close combat. It's strong in defense and weak in attack. The yellow shield is for strengthening close combat. The warrior and knight will leave, and the mage will attack. The red shield is for high magic resistance, and it's for close combat. Duque emphasized patiently in the whisper of the wind. To put it bluntly, Archimonde had indeed returned to his roots and focused on his warlock abilities. Even the power of a warlock wasn't like cabbage that fell from the sky for no reason. Unlike ordinary warlocks who needed to summon demon servants to have the corresponding support power, as the commander of the Burning Legion, Archimonde could directly use the power of a certain type of demon. There was a problem here. For a period of time, he could only use one type of demon power. After all, the demon guard that focused on close combat and the hellhound that focused on magic were completely different types of power. It was impossible to master them. It was precisely because Duque had used the system to analyze Archimonde's power attribute, and even accurately calculated how long each power could be maintained. That was why he had attacked so crazily just now. Before transmigrating, changing the attack mode to change the damage output was definitely a rotten trick. At this point in time, this was definitely the first time something new had appeared. Unfortunately, in front of an experienced driver like Duque, an old leader, it was simply no worth it. 1. Raise. It was shocking for AK, but it was a blessing for the hero team. Without Duque's command, they would either be wiped out after a few random attacks, or they would have to pay a heavy price to find out the pattern. It definitely wouldn't have been so easy. After so many rounds of intense battle, only Brock was seriously injured and had his arm broken. It was truly a miracle. Duque stepped out from the crowd and took out a feather fan from his interspatial bag. He waved it like a pig. Archimonde, this day next year will be the anniversary of your death. It was extremely pretentious and F***ed up, but everyone felt relieved when they heard it. Humph. You bunch of ants are worse than scum. A big shot was a big shot. He had been defeated like a dog, but he was still very stubborn. However, the next moment, Duque realized that something was wrong. Several experts suddenly touched their chests, intentionally or unintentionally. It was a palpitation of unknown origin, as if something had entered their bodies. No, it might even have entered their souls. However, they knew nothing about this mysterious and strange existence, or some evil power. Looking at the system notification, Duque's face turned green. He couldn't help but exclaim, "Curse of misfortune?" Hee. Smart, but knowing it doesn't mean you can deal with it. An evil smile appeared on Archimonde's face. Then it was his turn to attack. As the boss of the Burning Legion, there seemed to be no restriction of only being able to use one curse on a target. Curse of Pain, that caused damage. Curse of Weakness, that reduced the target's damage. Curse of Elemental, that reduced the target's resistance to shadow and frost. He gave all the curses that could be used to Old Cow. These weren't the main point. The main point was the Curse of Misfortune, that killed people. The Curse of Misfortune was a curse that had a delayed effect. It was fine if the damage was extremely high. The most terrifying thing was that once someone died under the Curse of Misfortune, an apocalypse guard would immediately be born from the dead person's corpse. There were all-powerful experts in the hero domain. Who knew who would die under the real curse and what level of demon would be born? It might not even be rare for a demon lord to be born. Duque's face turned green. Chapter 963. As a transmigrator, how could Duque not know about the one-button undoing curse? Countless players complained that dispelling curses and whatnot was like whack-a-mole. Whoever lit up would win. As someone who had the system elf, of course. Duque wouldn't use such a cheap and stingy thing like one click to remove curses. He would always give it to the system elf, and it would automatically remove curses. Most of the time, many people who were cursed would instantly feel a chill and then feel nothing, because Duque had undone it in less than a tenth of a second. However, Archimonde's Curse of Misfortune was clearly of a different dimension from other curses. Other curses were like a slip knot on a rope. As long as the source and target were found, it was very easy to solve. Why was the Curse of Pain painful? It couldn't be solved because it was painful. It was because the Curse of Pain had secretly blocked someone's blood vessels and caused internal injuries. That was why the victim would constantly be hurt in an intense battle. Now that he understood it, he just needed to dispel the dark power. The principle was not much different from preventing a stroke. The Curse of Misfortune was like putting a big basin full of wet and messy cotton rope, and then saying, "Come on, untie me." Its degree of difficulty and complexity was definitely higher than the other curses with a difficulty coefficient of 1. Open a few more cubes. The problem was if it couldn't be undone they would die. Even if they entered the realm of heroes, how could the physical strength of mortals compare to extraordinary beings like dragons who had super long HP bars? Everyone knew how troublesome it was. The moment the mages sensed this curse, almost all the pharaoh were dumbfounded. No. I can't undo it. Caponia and Solarian were the first to give up. Duque, the former elf prince's face was full of shame and shame. I can't either. Jaina gritted her teeth and showed a resentful expression. At first, Duque thought that Ronan couldn't do it either. Unexpectedly, Ronan gave Duque a huge surprise. I can guarantee that I can take care of myself and a specific target before the curse breaks out. On the other side, Malfurion, the great druid who could also remove curses, frowned. I can also be responsible for a target other than myself, but my healing ability will be weakened. Now was the time to make a decision. While it was safe to retreat, it would also greatly weaken the team's attack power. It wasn't impossible to fight head-on, but the risk would increase exponentially. Duque gritted his teeth and said, "Only 10 people. Ronan will take care of himself and Cain. I'll deal with the other 8. Cain, Grom, Thrall, me, Ronan, Alexandros, Tyrallion, Servanas, Tyrant, and Malfurion will stay." Duque quickly decided who would stay on the battlefield. In other words, the rest of you should leave immediately. Everyone was eager to participate in Archeron's final kill. Unfortunately, strength was an incomparably cruel dividing line. If you have the ability, then go up. If not, then go down. Shamelessly staying in the team was irresponsible to themselves, their teammates, and even the entire world. Jaina raised her staff and shouted, "Duque, you must win. I'm waiting for you to avenge me. Everyone, let's go and block the mountain entrance. Don't let a single demon in." After Jaina led the slightly weaker champions away, there were suddenly only 10 champions and Archerons left in a radius of 1,000 meters. No. It shouldn't be like this. It can't be like this. Archerons had many tricks up his sleeves, but Duque was too experienced. With the help of the system elf, his dirty tricks were often completely seen through by Duque the moment they started. Even though many champions had left and their attack power was inevitably weakened, Archeron's life force was indeed weakened. The situation was so bad that he had to make a decision. At the beginning, Archeron's idea was to cruelly crush the ants in front of him, then walk over majestically, destroy the World Tree, and absorb the power of the World Tree and the Well of Eternity. But now this idea was definitely different. Accomplishing both at the same time had become an unattainable task. However, there was still a chance of accomplishing one goal. Suddenly, Archeron's entire body was covered by a large blue cover. Not only that, but a void demon that was even larger than him rose from his back. He wants to be a turtle until the end? Duque's first reaction was to be surprised. As the saying went, defending for too long was bound to fail. Blindly defending would not end well, unless, seeing Archerons give up on dealing with the other champions, turning around Cain and charging towards the center of the mountain, almost every champion suddenly realized that something was wrong. Not good. He's going to force his way to the World Tree. Tyrant's face paled. "Stop him!" Malfurion roared, his hands digging into the ground. Immediately, huge thorns as thick as a water bucket burrowed out of the black soil and wrapped around Archeron's legs. Not enough. Far from enough. Mere thorns could not stop Archerons, whose legs were covered in destructive fire. Using the flames of destruction and extraordinary brute force, Archerons was like a train that had lost speed, charging towards the World Tree without looking back. That's right. The World Tree. Only by absorbing the power of the World Tree could he recover from his injuries and turn the tables. If this continued, he would only be exhausted to death by Duque and the others. Full attack. Duque's heart-wrenching roar echoed in every champion's heart. Queen Sylvana stood on one leg and used a special secret technique to instantly strengthen the bowstring by several times. Then she knocked a thick arrow that was comparable to a siege hammer. The sound of the arrow leaving the bowstring was like thunder. Ronan stacked 36 arcane impact in one go and activated arcane energy. Whether it succeeded or not, The next attack would empty every drop of magic power in his magic circuit. He would not be able to cast even a low-level spell in a short period of time. Thrall used Hammer of Destruction, with all his strength. All the champions used their ultimate skills. Unfortunately, it was not enough. The Eridar demon's body was too strong. Even if Mograine used all his strength to swing, Ashbringer, to destroy that damned barrier, even if Turalyon used Quell Zarim, that was infused with all of his holy light to cut off Archimonde's right leg, he still could not stop Archimonde from creating another barrier and stumbling towards the World Tree, nor Drassel. In an instant, it was as if the entire world of Azeroth trembled. The entire Mount Hyjal echoed with Archeron's crazy laughter. Ha! All your efforts will be in vain. I am already absorbing the power of the World Tree. Soon, your hearts will stop beating. Chapter 964. Stop him. Malfurion let out a desperate roar. Once the power of the World Tree is absorbed, it will reverse and release Breath of Destruction. Weaken him, or we won't be able to use our last resort. The great druid didn't have time to explain what Breath of Destruction was, but it didn't sound like anything good. Far away, all the lesser elves on Mount Hyjal, and even the surrounding areas were alarmed. Gorgeous light balls began to fly toward the World Tree at high speed. Those light balls were the most basic unit of the Night Elves, Lesser Elves. They were the craftsmen of the Night Elves who could help the elves collect wood and other resources. At the same time, they were also the final form of the Night Elves after their souls returned to the earth. There was no time to investigate the legend of the Lesser Elves. However, what was certain was that if Archimonde's vitality did not fall below the lower limit, these Lesser Elves in soul form would only be courting death if they rushed over and self-destructed. They would probably be forced to fall in an instant, and then be made into materials for soul retribution. Stop him! Mograine slashed out with Ashbringer, for the last time. Then he knelt down on the ground, panting heavily. For an old soldier who was approaching the age of 60, he was no longer young. Ashbringer, which seemed to be infinitely powerful and could blast the Calamity soldiers into pieces, was a typical holy artifact. However, using such a powerful weapon also required physical strength and mental strength. After squeezing out all the strength in his body, he slashed out a brilliant golden crescent. This golden crescent slashed over, but Archimonde dodged it the moment before it hit. An incomparably thick right leg fell to the ground. However, Archimonde really didn't know what kind of talent he had. He was actually climbing up with 2 arms and 1 leg. Stop him! Turalyon also went all out. Quell Zarim burst out with a golden light like the sun, and the long beam of light directly penetrated Archimonde's back from behind, exploded from his chest, and even shot into the trunk of the World Tree. It looked like a golden spear had nailed Archimonde to it. However, in just 3 seconds, Archaron's continued to climb. His 3 limbs glowed with an evil black light as they clung to the bark of the World Tree, and began to corrode the green bark of the World Tree at a high speed. What was even more frightening was that his severed right leg seemed to have started to grow a new, tender, and much smaller leg. Stop him! Tyrande was sobbing uncontrollably. She ignored her right hand that was bleeding profusely, and continued to draw her bow and shoot arrows mechanically. Every long-range hero that could still attack chased after Archimonde in a frenzy. They desperately poured their firepower into Archimonde's back, who seemed to have lost all sense of pain. Even Gianna and the others had rushed back, but the effect was getting weaker and weaker. It was very simple. Melee professions could not wear heavy armor and climb a World Tree that seemed to require at least 1,000 people to hug. After losing the damage from the 2 strongest sacred swords, the entire team's attack power dropped by more than a level. Now they had almost reached the critical point. Although Archimonde's life force had dropped to a very dangerous level, as long as he absorbed a large amount of the power from the World Tree and successfully converted it into dark energy, he would be able to turn the tables. Not only would he be able to kill Duke and the others, but he would also be able to carry out his evil plan and kick all of Azeroth into the abyss of destruction. The tearful Tyrande suddenly remembered that she still had one last sacred sword. She turned her head and stared at Duque. Duque, anything is fine. I beg you. Thrall realized that his side was starting to lose strength. After the fourth throw of the Hammer of Ruin, there was no hope of taking down Archimonde. He turned around and said, "Duque, it's all up to you now." Ronan struggled to get up from the ground and howled. "The destruction of Dalagen." Mograine shouted unwillingly. "The fall of Lord Aaron." Jaina flashed to Duque's side. Her fists were clenched, and her fair skin was red with anger. "Duque, the revenge of my father and brother." Servanas stabbed his longbow into the ground and shouted, "The revenge of every Quell Dorii." Thousands of elite warriors who refused to retreat stared at Duque from afar. Thousands of elven souls stared at Duque. Countless forces, every one of them who had thrown themselves in front of the magic mirror, gritted their teeth and cheered for Duque and the rest. They were all staring at Duque. They were waiting. They were looking forward to it. They were sincerely longing for it. They were screaming in their hearts. They prayed that Duke Marcus, who was hailed as Azeroth's greatest hero in the last 1,000 years, for them, for the whole world, would deal a fatal blow to the evil and terrifying existence. The commander of the Burning Legion, Archimonde. The feeling of being watched and looked forward to by billions of creatures made Duque's heart extremely heavy. Duque had long understood that he had to go all out. Only he, who also held a holy sword, could seriously injure Archimonde and create a chance for the elves to self-destruct. However, this could not be done by a clone. After all, a clone was a clone, and its strength could never exceed that of the main body. Someone who could kill Archimonde. The only possibility was for him to do it himself. No one knew what Archimonde's final killing move would be. No one could guarantee what the consequences of killing Archimonde would be. There were only two paths in front of Duque. Either he missed the opportunity and became the sinner of all of Azeroth, or he became a hero for 10 seconds. Duque smiled. He smiled casually. That bright and clear smile was aimed at Jaina, at Servanas, at every lover who was watching him silently from afar, and at everyone who trusted him and entrusted their last hope to him. "I'm going." There was a soft sound. It was also a sound that seemed as light as a feather. But it made countless women fall in love with him. Duque's figure instantly turned into a stream of light, and when he appeared again, he was already under the tree. "Grom," the same calm voice called out, allowing the orc god of war to completely understand what Duque was thinking about. The burly figure was the first to leap onto Kane's totem pole. Kane used the last of his strength to hit Grom high up into the air like a flying ball. That was the highest jump Grom Hellscream had ever made. Chapter 965. An arrow pierced through the clouds, and an army of thousands came to meet. At this moment, Lord Howl was more than an army of thousands. That aura of choosing people to devour. That earth-shattering roar. That blood howl that turned the tide of the battle. All of them were Archimonde's death warrant. In order to deal with the long-range bombardment of the heroes, Axebody's resistance had already switched to a high magic resistance state. Grom's unexpected leap into the air caused Archimonde to panic. Gritting his teeth, Ak roared, "Hand of Death." In theory, the effect of Hand of Death was to kill all targets within 30 meters. Unfortunately, Archimonde was too weak. He had been injured repeatedly, and most of his magic power had been diverted to the protective shield. Hand of Death, which was supposed to kill Grom instantly, landed on his chest with a loud bang. The orc god of war, who had extremely high HP, took the hit head-on. Then, the scarlet long-handled axe drew a dazzling blood-red crescent in the air. The tip of the crescent was Archimonde's neck. Ah! With a scream, blood splattered everywhere. Half of Archimonde's neck was cut off from his body. If he were a mortal, he would have died hundreds of times, but he was a great demon of Eridar with extremely strong vitality. Even though the huge wound on his neck was like a fountain, he still didn't die. Scram! A large AoE air explosion blasted Grom's body into the ground like a meteor. He crashed into the thick black ground and created a huge crater. At this moment, Duque arrived. A simple long-range flash appeared on Archimonde's broad back. "Farewell, Archimonde." Duque's shout spread in all directions. "Gone. It's over." There were so many people who covered for Duque's last attack, but Archimonde couldn't find any way to protect himself at the very end. He was in so much despair, so much hatred. If he had 10 more seconds, he could have completed the transformation of the World Tree's power, repaired his body, and won this easy final victory for him. However, it was at this crucial juncture that Duque arrived with the holy sword in hand. The golden light shone brightly, resplendent and glorious, with all the best wishes in the world of Azeroth. It was accompanied by the ethereal singing of holy children singing hymns in unison. Duque extended his left hand forward and pulled his right hand back. Like a drawn bow, he made a stabbing posture. The gears of time seemed to have rusted and solidified at this moment. Archimonde, who was at his wit's end, sent a wisp of divine sense to Duque. "Don't kill me. I only need the power of the world tree. I swear I will not pollute this world. Otherwise, even if I die, I will give you the most terrible curse, polluting your soul so that you will never be able to become divine again. After you die, you will definitely degenerate into the ugliest demon." This was the deepest form of intimidation. It was also a threat that would definitely come true. The mysterious curse of a dying great demon was undoubtedly the most terrifying evil existence. Duque smiled. Archimonde was just stalling for time. How could he not know? He replied with a divine sense. "Just as I never dare to overestimate the moral integrity of a demon, I will also not underestimate my courage. It turns out, I am also quite a brave person, although I was forced to at first." With a faint but determined smile, Duque stabbed the unknown holy sword in his hand into Archimonde's head like lightning. What came out of Archimonde's mouth was not only screams, but also a solid curse that was so thick that everyone could see it with the naked eye. If one ignored the black color that made people tremble, this huge curse was as long and magnificent as the Milky Way falling from the sky. Unfortunately, this incomparably illusory curse waterfall symbolized the ultimate evil of the world. It was the most violent destruction. It was the most terrible blasphemy. It was the deepest pollution. It was the strangest distortion. At this moment, everyone who looked at Duque with anticipation suddenly realized that they had forced Duque to make a terrible decision. No. Thousands of miles away, Queen Kalia, who saw this scene, fainted on the spot. Duque. Alucia's eyes were filled with tears. Nearby, Tyron's entire body was trembling, and she suddenly fell from the white tiger. Jaina suddenly felt all the strength in her body being sucked out, and she collapsed to the ground. Servana's face was pale, and he immediately knelt on the charred ground. Seeing this scene, Malfurion no longer felt like taking care of his allies. He raised his vine-like staff high up, and let out a long and complicated roar towards the sky. In the entire world, every little elf received his signal to attack. Hundreds of thousands of little elves drew colorful streams of light in the sky, and they all rushed towards Archimonde. Bang bang bang. Boom boom boom. At first, there was only a series of firecracker-like sounds, but it soon turned into thunder, and then into the continuous roar of tens of thousands of cannons. It was completely unacceptable to people's hearing. Not only hearing, but the terrifying strong light produced by the continuous crazy explosions. And even those who had their backs to the light source could still feel the unbearable strong light. Through the palms and arms that were covering their eyes, the strong light pierced through their muscles and skin, and pierced into their eyeballs. All kinds of screams. Screams. Painful cries. Endless screams. Every hero's senses were completely messed up. For a long time, no one knew how long it had been, Servanas finally opened his eyes. The huge world tree, Nordrassil, was like a lonely guard standing on a lonely land, and the crimson lightning that fell from the clouds outlined its outline. The heroes who had survived the terrible battle looked down at the battlefield that was nearing its end. In all directions, the few troops of various factions were retreating like a tide from the plateau on the top of Mount Hyjal through the teleportation portal. There were not many corpses. Perhaps the most eye-catching corpse was Archimonde, who was nailed to the trunk of the world tree. His huge corpse, which had recovered to its original height of 150 meters, was so eye-catching that it almost occupied the entire vision of the heroes. Accompanied by the crimson fireworks in the sky, looking around at the battlefield that was like a ruin, with debris and broken tiles everywhere, it was like a painting of the end of the world. Duque? Where's Duque? Jaina and Queen Cia exclaimed at the same time. Suddenly Ronan held a pitch-black body and shouted, "Teacher is here. He's still breathing. Let's leave first. The portal is already starting to become unstable." Chapter 966. Without any explanation, two strong arms picked up the two queens and plunged into the teleportation gate. The next moment, hundreds of miles away, the once huge and lush world tree's crown could be clearly seen shining brightly. After a violent tremor, the entire mountaintop exploded. Then a terrifying shock wave and dazzling fire swept through the entire Mount Hyjal like a huge wave that could destroy the world. All signs of life were swept away by the wave of destruction at this moment. The night elves who had already taken refuge watched blankly as the home they had lived in for nearly 10,000 years was destroyed in this world-shaking explosion. Woo-woo, woo-woo-woo. Countless elves knelt on the ground and prayed, wailing loudly. At the same time, in the wizard tower of Theramore Harbor, there was also a loud cry. "Damn it! I asked you to see if you could do anything, not to sacrifice yourself." Jaina knelt in front of the bed, tears streaming down her face. Servanas also knelt, his hands clasping the palm of the black figure on the bed. He pursed his lips tightly and did not say a word, his body trembling non-stop. The grief of the two queens was clearly expressed. In order to defeat Archimonde and his main force of the Burning Legion, the Alliance paid a heavy price. At this moment, in Theramore Harbor, almost every piece of green grass was neatly placed with corpses. Those who slept here were the familiar faces of the living who stood where they were in the past. Although each of them had written their wills and were prepared to accept their sacrifice before coming here. And this battle had ended in victory as well, proving that all their previous efforts were absolutely meaningful. But compared to such a victory, they would rather die in battle with their companions on Mount Hyjal, and not taste the suffocating despair that came from the Mage Tower. In order to kill Archimonde, the commander of the Burning Legion, their most respected hero of the Alliance, Duke Marcus, also suffered the most terrifying backlash when he killed this super big demon. An unknown and terrifying death curse had filled his entire body with the most evil and dark power. Since the invasion of the orcs, they did not enjoy many years of peace, and the Burning Legion also came. Everyone said that the test for Azeroth was yet to come. If they lost a powerful leader like Duque at this time, no one knew what would happen next. Would the Alliance disband? Would the world come to the brink of destruction? All of the soldiers experienced the feeling of fear, worry, and helplessness towards the future after victory. It was as if they harbored a thirst for military achievements and hope in life, but were immediately seriously injured and on the verge of death as soon as they stepped onto the battlefield. They had no choice but to face the cruel reality of having their dreams shattered. It was a terrifying feeling, as if all future prospects were about to be destroyed. On top of the Mage Tower, Turalian, who was holding Quel'Zarim tightly, had tears streaming down his face. Similarly, Mograine, who was holding Ashbringer by the window, had a similar expression on his face. As comrades who had worked with Duque for more than a decade, they knew better than anyone else how important Duque was in pushing the Alliance forward. Not to mention that Duque had a close relationship with the three queens. In the current alliance, apart from Magni, there was not a single king from the previous generation left. In this political arena where political capital and achievements were the most important, there was no one who could replace Duque, not even temporarily. If they lost Duque here, it would definitely be a heavy blow to the alliance's politics, economy, and military. It might be better if Duque died in battle, but what they feared the most was that Duque would fall like Prince Arthas. That would be the nightmare of the Alliance, and even the entire world of Azeroth. A leader who understood the Alliance and even the Horde the best, who had wisdom far above others, had fallen into the Burning Legion's sharpest claws. Just thinking about it made Turalian and Magni shiver. Looking at Duque, who was entangled by the dark aura and his body twitching, Jaina's tear-stained face looked as if she had been stabbed. She turned her head and questioned Benedict, Riataline, and all the clerics. "Can't you do anything to find a way to get rid of the dark power in Duque's body?" None of the clerics dared to respond to Queen Kurtiraz's anger immediately. At this time, Queen Sylvanas pressed the back of Jaina's hand with one hand. "Enough! Didn't they say it before? It's useless to blame them. Duke's magic circuit is too fragile. This is the result of suddenly being invaded by dark power. When Duke used up his magic power, forcibly injecting external holy light will only cause every inch of Duke's magic circuit to collapse and explode. Could it be? Could it be? Jaina was about to lose control of her emotions. Are we just going to watch Duke die like this? Only silence answered her. At this time, Vanessa suddenly knocked on the door. Her face was also tear-stained. Several representatives of the Horde are outside Theramore. They want to see Master Marcus. Jaina was completely out of control. What are those cruel orcs doing here at this time? Do they want to see if Duke is dead, and then take the opportunity to defeat the Alliance? Mograine gently pressed on Jaina's shoulder and shook his head. My old brother Theon once said, I've seen the dirtiest humans, but I've also seen the greatest orcs. So, glory has no borders. Jaina fell silent. Turallion nodded to Vanessa. Let them come up. Not long after, Thrall, Grom, Wajin, Kane and several other Horde leaders came up. Kane was too big, so he could only stay under the Mage Tower. The other three came up, holding a bouquet of flowers. Although the flowers did not match the burly and violent appearance of the orcs, everyone still felt a trace of warmth. Thrall spoke directly in the standard human language. I know that we may not be welcome, but this time, we have nothing to do with our position. It is purely to express our respect for a great hero. Perhaps one day, the Alliance and the Horde will go to war again. Even so, I hope to see a healthy and powerful Duke Marcus on the battlefield, rather than hiding in a dark corner and rejoicing that a strong enemy has left. Thrall was so open and aboveboard that several paladins silently bowed slightly to Thrall to show their respect. Sylvanas and Jaina stood up together, and also bowed to Thrall. Finally, it was Queen Sylvanas who spoke. Thank you for your visit. This cooperation between the Alliance, the Horde, and the Night Elves was single-handedly facilitated by Duke on the Alliance's side. We also hope that we can finish what we started. Before there are new developments, we hope to maintain a state of peace with the Horde. Chapter 967. Duke felt very uncomfortable. His entire body was holding on. That terrible feeling was like forcing an ordinary person who liked to eat vegetarian food to participate in a eating contest, and make him swallow 100 hot dogs in one go. What was worse was that it was an expired hot dog. The dark forces kept tearing at Duke's soul. They used all kinds of words and all kinds of scenes to tempt Duke. Destroy. Destroy. Destroy everything that you don't like. Possess. Seize. Occupy everything that you like the most. Countless thoughts attacked Duke's soul. They forced Duke to vent again and again, to release the negative emotions in the depths of his soul. Normally, if Duke was an ordinary native of Azeroth, unless he was a saint like Uther, he would have fallen long ago. Because the terrifying curse forced Duke to destroy 100 worlds, 1,000 castles, and occupy 10,000 beauties. Fortunately, transmigrators had their own way of releasing pressure. It was a unique virtual space in Azeroth. Ah! I'm the master of my world. Duke laughed loudly as he created 100 worlds in SimCity. Then he summoned natural disasters, either flooding or burning them, destroying the 100 worlds. Just castles, be destroyed under my iron hooves. Duke laughed maniacally as he wantonly raided houses in Exile Conan, destroying the 1,000 castles that foreigners had painstakingly built. Teachers, submit to Duke's godly sword. Wahahaha. Duke laughed sinisterly as he immersed himself in the 10-terabyte action movies that he had watched before. He wreaked havoc and fought with the teachers over and over again. After completing all the requirements, Duke suddenly woke up. His head was very heavy. His eyelids were very heavy. Even so, Duke still felt that his hands were tightly held by a pair of warm and soft hands. He's awake. He's really awake? Everyone be careful. The surroundings were in a state of chaos. Duke slowly opened his eyelids and saw two beautiful faces with tears in their eyes. Then, the rest of the passers-by like Turallion and Thrall were all ignored by Duke. F***ck. I actually changed from a European commander to an African chief. Duque said something that no one understood the moment he opened his mouth. Duque didn't expect anyone to understand his self-deprecating way of saying that he had fallen from a lucky star to an unlucky ghost. But I don't feel comfortable if I don't complain. For some reason, Duque's strange way of speaking made the holy knights at the side heave a sigh of relief. Holy light above, Duque, I truly admire you. You've been corrupted by the power of darkness, yet you're still able to maintain your consciousness. Mograine placed the large Ashbringer beside his hand. Turallion, on the other hand, was in a dilemma. His rationality told him to remain vigilant. After all, the fall could happen in an instant. Perhaps the fallen Duque still retained his cunning, and this was purely to numb people. What was interesting was that apart from him, everyone chose to believe that Duque had survived. Even the leaders of the tribe heaved a long sigh of relief. What? Duque is awake. Cain, who was more than 4 meters tall and had a huge body, actually shamelessly climbed up the stairs to the highest floor of the Mage Tower when he heard the commotion. He stuck half his head out of the door and kept looking. Duque, are you alright? The tear ducts of the 2 queens were too developed. Their tears flowed endlessly like a broken dam. How can I be alright? Wait a moment, let me see if I can examine myself. Duque sighed and summoned the System Elf. Hey System Elf, if you're not dead, let out a grunt. Humph. Duque was speechless. Help me examine my body. Host, I've already finished my examination. You're currently in a shadow form that can't be switched. Huh. Wait. Wasn't I cursed? If you're talking about Archimonde's curse before he died, then it should be a very high priority and compulsive mental suggestion. By asking you to complete a specified depravity event, it will cause your mind to naturally distort. However, you've already completed all the compulsive requirements with the virtual reality simulation. Now, according to my assessment, your mental health is at 60%. So I've lost 40%. Duque secretly sighed. No, host, you've only lost 15% of your mental health because of the curse. By the way, before you came to Azeroth, the host's mental health index was 55%. Wait. Something's wrong. Duque wanted to shut the System Elf up, but it was too late. Before the host came to Azeroth, you were just a young man who failed many subjects and almost had to repeat a year in his first year. Then, your heart was filled with dissatisfaction with the status quo and a strong desire for the opposite sex. After you came to Azeroth, as the host's social status increased and you received love from the opposite sex, your mental health index peaked at 80%. Host, your mental health peaked at 80%. Before today's battle, it was 75%. It's dirty. Shut up. Duque's face darkened. Alright, he was completely black now, so he couldn't tell. The System Elf obediently fell silent. After a while, Duque said, Tell me the possible solution. The next moment, Duque's consciousness returned to reality. Duque said slowly, Where's my holy sword? Here. Vanessa hurriedly handed over the slender holy sword. Looking at the once unknown holy sword, Duque was suddenly speechless. For some reason, most divine weapons in Azeroth had long, human-like names, such as Azeroth's dual blades or Atish, the legendary staff of the Guardian. He had always been vexed. Why didn't his divine weapon have a name? Only later did he realize that divine weapons had to awaken their true names. According to the System Elf, when you truly merged with the will of the divine weapon, the most realistic image in your mind, and that name would automatically become the name of the new divine weapon. In the end, what did Duke, who had a sword in one hand and a staff in the other, think of when he killed Ak? Once upon a time, in the epic fantasy movie The Lord of the Rings, there was a powerful mage who did not know any spells at all. He only had the illuminating spell, and the rest of his talents were all dual wield, berserk, and other messy talent skills. He also held a staff in his left hand and a sword in his right, sweeping through thousands of orcs without panting. That's right, he was the famous white-robed sword sage Gandalf. In the end, the moment Duque killed Archimonde, he thought of Mr. Dry Tofu. Alright, something had happened. Duque picked up the slender holy sword sage, and there were a few words written on it. Gandalf, the legendary sword of the white-robed sword sage. Duque almost spat out a mouthful of ketchup. Chapter 968. This was not the first time Duque had wanted to change the name of his one and only divine weapon. In the end, this damned holy sword was like dried tofu, smelly and hard. It only recognized itself as dried tofu and ignored everything else. Alright, Duque gave in. If worst comes to worst, I'll just find a better divine weapon in the future and replace you. In the next second, when Duque silently recited the full name of the holy sword, everyone suddenly discovered that the long blade had turned into a translucent illusory form. This is... Servana's tear-stained face was full of astonishment. I have to do my best. I believe that light and darkness can be changed in this world. Since Arthas was able to fall from a glorious holy knight to the most evil death knight, I believe that I can also overcome the power of darkness in my body and change myself back to the side of light. Duque's sonorous and forceful words caused everyone in the room to freeze in shock and admiration. Duque faced the left. Turalyon, I know that you are the most rational of all of us. Now I need you to be rational. So please place Quell Zarum on my neck. If things go wrong, you can chop off my head. Turalyon's facial muscles kept twitching and trembling. He really wanted to curse at Duque for giving him such a cruel task. Even if they were once the best of comrades and friends, Turalyon still felt a deep pain when he had to personally play the double role of monitor and executioner. In the end, thousands of words turned into an incomparably heavy nod. Yes. On the other side, Servanas gently took out a dagger that she always carried with her. She placed the sharp blade against her throat. Duque, if you fail, I'll accompany you. I accompany you. These 3 words sounded soft, but they contained a deep love. Everyone in the room was visibly moved by his words. Without needing to say anything, Jaina condensed a similarly sharp icicle and calmly pressed it against her own throat. The 2 queens calmly smiled at Duque. The breeze that blew in from the window made their golden hair flutter, as if saying that as long as Duque could not turn the light in his body into the same color as their hair, then tragedy would be the only ending. Please move back to the wall. Everyone did as they were told. Everyone's gaze froze, and even their hearts seemed to have stopped beating. Everyone held their breath and watched as Duque smiled faintly as he pierced his own chest with the divine sword, whose blade had already turned completely illusory. There was no splatter of blood. However, there was an even more intense reaction. It was like a drop of water in a pot of boiling oil. In an instant, Duque's entire body was boiling. What unfolded before the eyes of the powerhouses was definitely a wondrous scene. Duque's entire body seemed to have turned into a large fountain cluster. Countless dark forces as black as ink spurted out from the corners of Duque's eyes, nostrils, mouth, ear holes, and even the pores on his skin. However, each long line of black liquid was illusory and translucent. Even though the evil aura on it could be felt from a distance, this evil power did not dissipate in midair and pollute the surrounding air. Instead, like a spring, it stretched to its limit and automatically shrank back into Duque's body. Duque's mind was clear. He also knew that what he was about to do sounded ridiculous, but it was not without foundation. In terms of battle history, the original Ashbringer was filled with a legendary aura. It was first Mograine's weapon, then as Mograine was tricked by his son, the Ashbringer, also followed Mograine's soul and became the fallen Ashbringer. Finally, it jumped back to the side of light and became Tyrion Fordring's killing weapon, killing the Lich King Arthas. In terms of professions, there were also holy priests and shadow priests who could switch talents at will. On a larger scale, including planet Azeroth, the multiverse was made up of light and darkness. Therefore, light and darkness were only relative existences. There was no absolute boundary. Duque's mysterious and strange prayer echoed throughout the room. Light originates from darkness, and light emerges from darkness. Light originates from darkness, and light emerges from darkness. It was repeated over and over again, like an infinite brainwashing cycle. Duque's performance, which was like a conman's, caused every witness to be dumbstruck and unable to control themselves. Yes, this was the incantation or line, chanted in the movie when Khadgar defeated Old Max, and reversed the corrupted Karazhan energy pool in order to save the world. Strictly speaking, this was not a real incantation. Remember, the power of holy light and the power of darkness were classic idealistic powers. Regardless of whether others believed it or not, he believed it. That was enough. Just like the brainwashing song Little Apple, it was not pleasant at first, but after listening to it for a while, not only did it sound good, but it also made him feel that he really did not need to take his medicine today, and he felt cute. That was how Duque hypnotized himself. Now it seemed to be a little useful. The power of darkness around him was still roiling endlessly. But at this moment, anyone could be surprised to find that the condensed power of darkness seemed to be rolling slower and slower. Then the ink-like black seemed to be impure. It was mixed with a lot of strange light. At first, it seemed to be dark gray, but gradually some people saw light gray, light white, pure white, and finally, there was a faint golden light, like a dancing golden snake in the thick ink. The two queens, who had been holding a sharp blade to their throats, began to tremble involuntarily. They could not believe their eyes. Clang. Queen Sylvie's dagger fell to the ground. The icicle in Jaina's hand also fell to the ground after losing the support of magic, turning into ice shards that no longer had any special meaning. In the room, every woman covered their mouth with their hands, afraid that they would scream and startle Duque, interrupting this epic-making process of whitewashing. Thrall and the others widened their eyes, and their eyeballs almost popped out of their sockets. Not only did Old Bull widen his eyes, but even his nostrils rapidly expanded, and he panted heavily. Ronan was the smartest. Even though he was as excited as the others, he did not forget his original intention, and quickly put up a protective barrier, trying to block the outside world as much as possible. The golden light increased, and became more and more intense. After a short 10 breaths, the golden light suddenly shone. And even outside the mage tower, a huge golden pillar of light shot into the sky. A golden Duque that seemed to be made of pure gold appeared in front of all the experts. Chapter 969. Turalian had long withdrawn the sword. Quelzaram would never be able to deal with a truly virtuous person. If he dared to use such a holy sword to slash a saint, he would have to wait for the sword to shatter a second time. Thrall opened his mouth so wide that a cantaloupe could be stuffed inside. Grom's unscrupulous mouth even accidentally dripped saliva. It couldn't be helped. The beastman's fangs were too long, and it was easy for saliva to drip out. But no one was offended, because most of them were just as unsightly. Vanessa was crying so hard that she looked like a cat with snot running out of her nose. Servanas and Jaina had unknowingly hugged each other. Their beautiful faces were tightly pressed together, and their tears were flowing together. It was impossible to tell whose tears they belonged to. In any case, all four eyes were fixed in Duke's direction, and they did not even blink, unwilling to miss out on any changes in the slightest. Even in the face of strong light, only Jaina used magic to create 2 black lenses in front of her eyes. When the dazzling golden light gradually faded, Duque pulled out the illusory holy sword from his chest again. His body turned from a 1,000-watt light bulb to the color of a normal person. At this time, almost all the powerhouses present heaved a sigh of relief. It seemed that Duque had escaped the fall. "Duque, are you all right?" The two queens asked in unison as they stretched out their hands. For jade-like hands seemed to be caressing Duque's body wantonly. It was as if they wanted to see if a certain part of Duque's body had demonized. Duque smiled bitterly and sighed. "Generally, I'm fine." This time, a long sigh of relief rang out in the large room. "Congratulations, Duque. I knew you could create miracles." If not for the 2 more noble queens in front, Mograine would have rushed up to give Duque a bear hug. "If possible, tell me how you returned from the darkness to the light." Actually, Duque didn't seem to know how to start, but he still chose to say it directly. "Alexandros, after all, that is the power of Archimonde, the commander of the Burning Legion. It's not that easy to get rid of." This. Mograine was stunned. Everyone's hearts were in their throats again. Duque sighed. "I'd better demonstrate it for you." After saying that, Duque's palm glowed with a holy light. Benedict was stunned. "Is this a healing spell?" That's right. That's right. It was a healing spell. Although it was a low-level healing spell, Duque managed to cast a low-level healing spell in the next second. The holy radiance shone on Jaina's finger, and the long wound that was scratched by the sharp icicle began to heal at a speed visible to the naked eye. That's impossible. Duque, aren't you a mage? Kale was a little confused. Duque didn't say anything. This time he turned to cast his spell on Turalian. This was a more advanced, quick heal spell. The holy light fell on Turalian's head, and he could clearly feel that it was the purest holy light. He just didn't know why the holy light was golden in the air, but it turned green when it reached his head. Well, don't worry about these details. Everyone's attention fell on Duque. Near the gate, Mograine's adopted daughter, Sally Whitemane, had her hands crossed in front of her chest. She was a little excited and a little confused as she asked, "Lord Marcus has become a holy priest?" Duque smiled bitterly. "If only it were that simple. What I'm going to do next is controllable. Please don't get excited, and don't cut me." Someone swallowed. Duque transformed magnificently. In less than half a second, the holy radiance surrounding him faded away, turning into a dark color as deep as the night. At this moment, Duque became the first shadow priest in the history of Azeroth, or shadow priest for short. What he used was the shadow form of a shadow priest, which could increase shadow damage and weaken the physical damage he received. Duque, this is. Turalian was also stunned. Just like 15 years ago, when the profession of warlock was first introduced to Azeroth. 10 years ago, many Dalajan wizards who couldn't continue on the path of wizards turned to warlocks who used dark power. I seem to have opened up a new talent for priests. Shadow. Turalian's face was full of embarrassment. How about it? Do you want to try the attack of a shadow priest? I'll be gentle. Curiosity killed the cat. Turalian seemed calm and rational, but he was also a curious and sharp person. Just like that, he held up his shield, and his body burst with holy light. He said in a deep voice, "I'm ready." Duque slowly raised his arm, stretched out his index finger, and spat out 4 words. Mental lash. Since it was a mental attack, it naturally had nothing to do with physical defense. Similarly, it was not a direct dark power. The damage that came from the soul almost made Turalian jump in pain. Ouch. Stop. Stop now. Duque smiled and stopped. Then, under everyone's gaze, he changed his talent again and became a holy priest. The crowd was speechless. All right. Now I have light and darkness coexisting in my body. Although the light is the absolute majority, I can't guarantee that I won't fall or something in the future. So, I'll take this opportunity to resign from the position of Alliance Commander. This is a good thing for me and the Alliance. The leaders of the Alliance instinctively wanted to persuade Duque not to do this, but after thinking about it carefully, they found that this was the best result. Before figuring out what a shadow priest was, no king would be at ease to hand over their army to a strong person who could use dark power, even if that person's name was Duke Marcus. The words that were about to come out of their mouths were all stuck in their throats. Only Jaina had a faint smile on her lips. Duque wasn't going to die in battle or fall completely. Even if he removed this title, would his influence on the Alliance fade? What a joke. 1 vote from each of the 3 queens was enough to influence any major decision in the Alliance. From Jaina's point of view, Duque's move to advance by retreating was extremely beautiful. Moreover, Duque had suffered because he wanted to kill Archimonde. If the hero who saved the world would be persecuted because of this, then there was no point in staying in the Alliance. If anyone dared to force Duque, Jaina was willing to bet that Kurtiras, Sindorii, and Rotterdam would definitely withdraw from the Alliance. Everyone was relieved that Duque was fine. At this moment, Duque smirked. Then is it time to split the spoils of war? Chapter 970. Gianna elegantly took out 2 clean handkerchiefs and handed one to Sylvanas. She used the other to wipe away the tears on her face. Natural beauties were truly amazing. If she were a so-called internet celebrity from the previous dynasty, she would have become a ghost with a mess of foundation and makeup oil on her face. After wiping her face, Gianna was that flirtatious beauty again. Yes, Duque, Are you going to share the spoils with us as a mage or a priest? Duque rolled his eyes at Gianna, a little speechless. Once she recovered, Gianna was back to being a smart and capable woman. Damn it. It would have been better if you didn't say it. Now that you've said it, how can I take the mage equipment, and then the priest equipment? No. I'll spank the girls who don't listen later. Duque, who had almost fallen into depravity, said righteously. I can clearly feel that my magic circuit is still functioning normally. Deep down, I'm still a mage, and I think I'll definitely recover in the future. But now that holy power has completely dominated my body, I instinctively reject all elements other than holy light. So I'll count myself as a priest for now. Duque voluntarily gave up his position as a mage, and Caponia could be seen secretly sighing in relief. There were so many strong people gathered this time, but the problem was that the classes of the strong people were quite clustered. Most of them were mages and warriors, but there was only one priest, Benedictus. There were 6 mages, and Duque, who was supposed to be the #1 hero and commander, was definitely going to take the best part of the pharaoh. Now Duque suddenly jumped to the side of the few priests. This was definitely good news for the pharaoh. Unfortunately, Caponia's joy only lasted for a second, because she immediately realized that most heroes actually didn't care about this. That's right. Most heroes are just trying to save the world itself. Take Ronan, for example. After the battle at Mount Hyjal, every mage looked at him differently. The old Ronan would always be the student of Marcus. The current Ronan was, without a doubt, the Arcana Master Ronan. Another example was her master, Cale Vats. Now that he had been cleansed of his reputation as a traitor and a despicable person, he could see former high elves saluting Cale. That's wherever he went. This change in status was a rare treasure that no amount of top-grade equipment could exchange for. Therefore, the spoils of war were only incidental. Of course, in this era where epic equipment had yet to appear in large numbers, everyone was happy to see such a large amount of high-quality equipment suddenly appear. Mograine said, I know you're more concerned about this, Duke. The moment Archimond was killed, I happened to grab the dimensional bag that fell out of his body while I was below him. Turalyon continued. Her Excellency Tyrant Whisperwind was busy clearing up the battlefield and taking care of the aftermath. She had said to thank everyone for their support, and that the Night Elves would not participate in the distribution of the spoils of war. However, there were 3 flashbows among the spoils of war. We only had 2 rangers, so we gave one to Sir Whisperwind. The rest of the spoils of war are here. Turalyon opened the dimensional bag and filled half the room with all kinds of shiny top-grade equipment. This time, even Duque was a little surprised. He had never thought that Archimond would have a mode of equipment explosion. Many of the equipment were not unique as he had imagined, but more like standard equipment. For example, the Windrunner sisters were not only playing with a flashbow, but also a feverish pursuit chainmail. Grom and Kane were also given a boundless fury leg armor, and the 2 macho men were overjoyed. Sar touched the blade of Cataclysm, which had a yellow base and a straight 2-handed sword, and laughed. Oh, Brock always complains that he doesn't have a suitable weapon. He'll be able to use this when his arm recovers. Originally, a small exquisite weapon like the Blade of Cataclysm would not have been given to Brock. After all, he was only Sar's guard. However, a bunch of close combat macho men were all tycoons when it came to weapons. The 2 paladins had divine weapons, but Sar and Grom each had their own special weapons. Old cow-like totem poles, so Brock could only take advantage of it. Moreover, the warrior equipment was basically distributed among the Horde members, so there would be no conflict. The competition among the mages was the fiercest. After Duque's withdrawal and Cale, that's lack of desire, the remaining 4 became extremely humble. In the end, Ronan was the biggest winner in the war. He obtained the one-handed magic sword Chaotic Storm that countless mage players had begged their grandfathers and mothers to get. Because he did not have a good secondary weapon, he almost wanted the Staff of Purification that priests loved, but Duque could not stand it and gave Ronan the secondary magic book, Chronicles of Dark Secrets, that he got from Raki Winterfrost. There was also a gorgeous robe that was pure black with purple and gold edges. Although everyone found out that it was an unknown robe after appraisal, and they wanted to name it Duke's robe. Duke blushed. Ever since he had blessed Ronan with holy light and found out that the holy light above Ronan's head was also green, Duke had guiltily, very humbly, given the right to name it. Ronan's robe. No problem. He waved his hand and generously gave the robe to Ronan. Seeing that Jaina was staring at Ronan's luxurious outfit, Duke had no choice but to give Jaina another set since he had 2 chaotic storm sets. After giving a few pieces of magic equipment to Caponia and Solarian, Duke also got himself a staff called Argus Apostle. This staff was a little imperfect in terms of attributes. It mainly increased endurance, spirit, and spell power, but did not increase intelligence. Fortunately, Duke's Breaking Dawn mage attributes were preserved. His intelligence was frighteningly high, and he did not care about this. Since he could only be a priest for now, his original, Obsidian Queen, and dried tofu, could not be used for the time being. He could only make do with this staff. Fortunately, the staff's appearance was very attractive. The body of the staff was a golden double-headed staff with a brown cross tied to it. It looked luxurious and imposing after the staff was bound to the hands. The 2 heads of the staff were also very special. Embedded on the body of the staff were 2 transparent rectangular crystal ornaments, not 2 heads of the staff. In the middle of the long crystal frame, there were 3 blue runes on each head. The mysterious magic runes on them shone brightly. This is high-end and grand. Duke suddenly felt that it was quite cool to be a priest. Chapter 971. Duke was very kind. Except for the times when he was not kind, he was very kind. There was nothing wrong with that. When Archimonde dropped 4 sets of Forgotten Protector's helmet, Sal's eyes were a little sad. Now, even a fool would know that this thing should be the same set as the previous gloves. Of course, the Horde wouldn't know what the effect of the set was. It was just that the Alliance had already forged the Forgotten Protector's gloves, and it was impossible to reforge it again. Since Archimonde had one, shouldn't they give it to him? At this time, the Alliance and the Horde were in a honeymoon period. Moreover, when they heard that there were more than 100,000 demons and more than 300,000 undead army in Fellwood Forest, the Night Elves and the Horde were very annoyed. Firstly, both sides needed help from the Alliance because the Alliance was the only one with extra troops. In fact, Duke already had a second reinforcement plan. Those who went to the Mount Hygel defense line were the most elite troops. Now that Arkharon was dead, the ordinary army of the Alliance could take care of the leaderless but powerful remnants of the army. Secondly, Sal was still too inexperienced. Duke's face was full of holy brilliance and he lied sincerely, sigh. I really didn't know that this thing would be the same set as Asgalar's. I even deliberately made 4 hunters' gloves in advance. Looking at the other 2 Gronk Wanderer's gloves that Duke took out, Sal could only sigh. It almost made the system elf want to remind Sal, hey, don't be fooled by this guy's righteous appearance. In fact, this guy was a shadow priest who sneaked into the priest team. He was the biggest liar of the Holy Church. In fact, Jaina saw through Duke's little thoughts. The problem was that Jaina in this life was no longer the Virgin Mary who crossed camps. She was a firm anti-orc. Duke only cheated Sal a little, and Jaina thought that Duke was too kind. The final result was that due to Duke's operation, a total of 12 sets of the Forgotten series of 2-piece sets belonged to the Alliance. The Forgotten Protector series belonged to the 4 Windrunner sisters. The Forgotten Conqueror was divided among Turalian, Mograine, Riataline, and the priest Duke. Because Jaina had Smoke Gloves and Chaotic Storm, she chose to give it up. As a result, Ronan, Kale, that's Caponia, and Solarian each got a set of Forgotten Victors. Including the sets, on average, each hero got at least 5 pieces of epic equipment that could only be obtained in the Cavern of Time after 15 years. Because the spoils of war this time were so plentiful and Duke's contributions were too great, a large amount of equipment that the participating heroes didn't need were all distributed to Duke for him to use. This was Duke's sacrifice for the world, forcing him from being the world's #1 mage to become a priest as compensation. The items that seemed messy were actually all high-quality goods. The epic jewelry blueprints were all taken by Duke. The key was that there were no thieves, shamans, or warlocks among the heroes. The only druid was given up. The warlock's equipment could be digested by a mage, but the shaman, thief, and druid's equipment were all in Duque's hands. After the loot was divided, everyone dispersed to give Duque some space to rest. Looking at the excellent equipment that still filled half of the room, Duque sighed. Vanessa, there's a lot of equipment here. Even if you can't use them, you should pick a few. You can use them when you break through to the realm of heroes. Thank you, Master. Vanessa smiled and pulled the bow on the back of the maid uniform in front of Duque. In the next second, the black and white maid uniform was tossed into the air and floated down. Duque was dumbfounded. The reason was, of course, not because Vanessa's maid uniform was empty or anything like that. Instead, it was because Vanessa, who was wearing a set of thin leather tights, walked gracefully to the table that was covered with equipment, and put on the thief equipment dropped by the 6 bosses of Mount Hygel one by one. Black feather boots, secret merchant's pants, Agato's belt, midnight breastplate, and lethal bracers. After Vanessa put on the 5 pieces of Mount Hygel equipment that could make 99% of the thieves in the world go crazy, she picked up the maid uniform again and put it on. When she lifted the skirt of the maid uniform again and tied the 2 high-tier epic daggers, Endless Pain and Tracking Dagger, to her thighs, everything was hidden under the seemingly traditional maid uniform. As if she was worried about the reverse ring that added hit, critical hit, and attack strength, Vanessa took out a string and threaded it. She then put it into her not-so-deep trench and smiled in satisfaction. Duque was dumbfounded for a long time. In the real world of Azeroth, there were no strict requirements for equipment levels. At most, it was just a matter of how much power the user could bring out. Generally speaking, as long as a physical profession stepped into the realm of heroes, most epic equipment could be used. The simplest indicator was whether the equipment would emit a specific light when it was worn for the first time. For example, excellent was green, excellent was blue, and epic was naturally purple. When Vanessa put on the high-tier epic equipment of Mount Hygel just now, it emitted an incomparably noble and elegant violet color, which meant that she could completely use the equipment. As if he had lost control after a stroke, Duque extended his right index finger shakily. Vanessa, when did you break into the realm of heroes? Vanessa smiled like a flower and twirled the hem of the maid uniform with her fingers. She gave a maid's bow. Oh, my dear Master Marcus, it's been 5 years. Duque was dumbfounded. It was clear that he was saying, "Why didn't I know? Why didn't you tell me? I'm sorry, my master. I didn't mean to hide it from you, but the profession of thief relies too much on equipment. Without a pair of good weapons, I can't even easily deal with an elite-level demon guard. Although I also know that you need combat power to besiege Archimonde. Unfortunately, as far as I know, you usually don't have any thief equipment collection, Master." So you hid it from me? Duque was speechless. Yes. I, who lacked the support of equipment, couldn't use it at all even though my skills were far superior to my father's, so I kept quiet. If Master sees this as me being disloyal to you, please punish me as you wish. Vanessa knelt down in front of Duque after saying that. Chapter 972. Duque was really annoyed. He really couldn't blame Vanessa. Physical professions relied on weapons the most. A rookie with a godly weapon in his hand, or a veteran with a stupid white weapon, whose attack was higher. Ignoring the fact that he was courting death, the rookie could beat the old bird 100 times over in terms of attack. Moreover, when Duque had cleared out Karazhan in the early years, he had given all the equipment to her father, Edwin Van Cleef. Although the epic equipment of Azeroth did not need to be distributed on the spot, the problem was that once it reached epic level, it would be bound to the soul. It could not be transferred at all. Considering that there were too many melee combatants against Archimonde, it would be too easy for Air Blast to harm old Cowcane, so Duque did not let Edwin come at all. This was a bit dramatic. Duque sighed. Alright, get up. I've never intended to blame you for this. Vanessa quickly got up, a victorious smile on her face. Alright, my beloved master. From today onwards, I can be anyone to you. Your most loyal maid. Your dagger in the dark. At this point, Vanessa suddenly changed the topic. Or your clearest eyes and ears. Oh, I'll go open the door. It should be your spoils of war delivered to your door. Spoils of war? Delivered to my door? Did Azeroth also have express delivery? Duque was dumbfounded. Vanessa's upper body did not move, but her lower body seemed to have activated sprint, and she floated out of the room at high speed. What the hell was this? The surroundings suddenly fell silent. The wizard tower was not just a lair for mages, but also a place for mages to conduct experiments. Soundproofing magic was a must. Thanks to the good soundproofing of the wizard tower, the noise outside could not affect this place at all. Duque found himself tired. He had fought with Archimonde for most of the day, and then he was hit. Then he woke up and adjusted his body. And then there was the spoils of war. Unknowingly, it was already midnight. It was time to rest. Looking at the empty room, other than a cabinet, a full-length mirror, a small table, and a bed, there was no other furniture. Duque suddenly felt that this guest room was terrible enough. Come on. Forget it, let's sleep. Duque had just fallen asleep when he felt the fluctuation of magical teleportation. He jumped up in fright. What the hell was this? A second later, a graceful female figure appeared in front of Duque. Jaina. Why? In the middle of the night, Jaina suddenly appeared in front of his bed in a pink robe that looked like the quicksand robe. Wearing a one-piece nightgown that was more than 50% transparent and barely covered her body, Duque stared at the faintly discernible seductive figure. His eyes widened, and he felt his mouth go dry. Why are you here? Duque asked dumbly. Why? Jaina let out a pleasant chuckle. Duque, this is my wizard tower, and this is my bedroom. Do I need a special reason to appear here? Duque slapped his forehead. God, I've been using my left hand too much lately. I've really become a retard. Every inch of a Magus tower was like a golden ruler. Every inch of space that was expanded would require an astronomical amount of investment, in terms of defense and functionality. In particular, Theramore was newly built. With Duque's life in danger, it was impossible to have a space in the wizard tower that was both safe and wouldn't affect the extra guest rooms outside. Only Jaina's bedroom could be of this level. But, even if simplicity was beauty, wasn't Jaina, as Queen Kurtira's, too plain? The clever Jaina easily saw through Duque's doubts. Why, I remember that you've never liked luxury. Is there a problem with my bedroom being so simple? No. Not a problem. Seeing Duque's eyes flickering, he hurriedly got out of bed. Jaina also picked up the quilt that Duque had just used, pulled it over, and lay down on her side, with her back to Duque. Duque was a little confused. He didn't know what Jaina was up to. The air fell into a strange silence. Suddenly, Jaina's faint sigh came from the dark room. Sigh. The voice was so plaintive that it made Duque feel as if his heart was breaking. Jaina's clear and gentle voice sounded. 13 years ago, there was a little princess who was told by her father that she was going to marry the greatest hero in the world, but for the time being, she could only stay by the hero's side in the name of his disciple. She came to a strange place with longing, learning everything she thought she should learn. Days passed, and the little princess grew up day by day. She soon discovered that the man who was supposed to be her husband didn't love her, and even had a faint sense of disgust and avoidance. She didn't know what she had done wrong, but she thought that since this was her unchangeable fate, as long as she didn't want to spend the rest of her life in tragedy, she had to learn to change herself, and let herself become the person he liked. The little princess's efforts were never effective. Every time they met, she felt that there was an invisible wall between her and the man who was supposed to be her husband. She could only sigh at the invisible wall day after day. Suddenly, one day, the hero disappeared in front of the world in order to protect the world. And the princess, who was starting to grow up, became his nominal widow. 10 years passed, and he appeared again when the world was in danger of destruction. He led a group of heroes to defeat the evil demon commander. Not only did he avenge her, but he also became a hero in the eyes of the world again. But the princess, who was no longer young, didn't even have the right to stand by his side. Maybe it was because he really hated her. Or maybe it was because human women can never maintain their beauty for thousands of years like the elves, who have a lifespan of tens of thousands of years. At this point, Jaina's sorrowful voice came to an abrupt stop. The air fell into a dead silence. After a long time, Jaina turned around, and under the flickering firelight, there were clear traces of tears. Duque, I don't know if my relationship with you has improved recently, but if it is, please tell me the reason why you hate me. If so, please tell me the reason why you hate me. The state guest house is about 100 yards to the left of the Magus Tower. If it wasn't for... Before Jaina could finish, her mouth was already sealed. A few seconds later, Duque smiled. This was for him, and also for Jaina. Fate had completely changed. Forcing the terrible Jaina from his previous life onto the Jaina who was willing to die with him in this life was simply stupid and blasphemous. Looking at Jaina, who was almost crazy with joy, Duque revealed a naughty smile. Come, let Teacher Du teach you what the flow of magic in the Oarzi position looks like. Chapter 973. What in the world was Oarzi frustrated front bend? Jaina didn't understand. But she was a very studious and smart student. When she saw Duque use his finger, which was filled with golden holy light, to draw the 3 hieroglyphic characters Oarzi in the dark air, Jaina understood immediately. An indescribable shyness rushed out from the depths of her soul, igniting every inch of her beautiful body, making every cell excited because of the anticipation of the unknown. Slowly turning her body, Jaina used her graceful body to construct a unique Oarzi with the style of Queen Kurtiras. Jaina, blushing, looked back and smiled. She should have been sly, but she pretended to be cute, with an indescribable sense of purity. Teacher Duque, is this right? Is my training posture correct? If it's not, please correct me, teacher. Teacher Duque looked at the perfect curve and swallowed. He helped correct it while saying, here is wrong. Legs need to be separated a little more. And then here needs to be held up a little higher. Don't block the view. And then? Don't move. Why are you trembling? Duque asked, knowing the answer. Isn't it because you are interfering with my magic circuit? That won't do. You practice frost magic, so you have to maintain a calm state of mind at all times. Jaina rolled her eyes at Duque and let him do whatever he wanted. Come to think of it, she had waited for 15 years. The most beautiful 15 years of a woman's life were spent in loneliness and waiting. She almost missed the shelf life of her youth. The only good thing was that she could finally give away this treasure before she turned 30. Jaina silently followed her heart. Not deliberately or pretentiously. When the magic circuit from Duke finally connected with her magic circuit, she cried and laughed. She let go of all her schemes and did not think about anything else. She enjoyed and endured this storm that she thought would never come. It was a storm that was 13 years late. During the long night, the teacher and disciple did many kinds of magic experiments. For example, the physics of friction heat generation. For example, the magic power flow experiment in the M-shaped pose. It was not until the end of the long night that Jaina finally fell asleep with tears on her face. The first rays of dawn appeared. Duque noticed that Jaina had woken up early in the morning and was staring at him strangely. What are you thinking about? Duque smiled, a little curious. Jaina caressed Duque's chest with her jade-like fingers. I'm wondering how long these days will last. Elves were good. They didn't have to worry about aging. Human life is too short. Although she's beautiful because of her short lifespan, when I think about how much of my youth I have left to fight for the favor of those heaven-defying existences who won't age for tens of thousands of years, I feel a little hopeless just thinking about it. A wave of guilt surged in Duque's heart. Gianna. Promise me you'll keep it a secret. I swear I won't reveal any secrets about you. As smart as Jaina was, she subconsciously felt that Duque was going to bring out something good, but she didn't know what it was. Actually, when I saved the Red Dragon Queen Alexstrasza, Her Majesty the Queen gave me a small gift as a thank you. It's the same as the night elves from before, the eternal kind. Duque was very vague. How could someone as smart as Jaina not know? Jaina's expression was very interesting. Before Duque transmigrated, there was never a lack of women who spent half a month's salary or more on cosmetics every month. If she didn't buy enough cosmetics every month, she would eat whatever the dog ate. If she bought too much, she would eat whatever the dog ate. If it was November 11th, she might have to prepare to eat dogs that month. Duke had still underestimated immortality, eternal youth and whatnot. To a beautiful woman who loved beauty and was about to grow old, it had a great lethality. Next, Jaina told him that she was actually also a fire mage, and her ultimate move was passionate fire. Ignoring her injured body from last night's experiment, Jaina courted death and unlocked almost all the poses. Then the two of them experimented until late in the morning. Noon, Sir Vanas looked at Jaina, who hid under the blankets with only two clear and shy eyes, not daring to make a sound. Then he looked at the embarrassed Duque. "Hey Duque, you're really something. Do you think Jaina would dare to take you away without my permission?" Queen Sylvie sat on the wardrobe, her long legs dangling. "I knew you wouldn't be able to let go of this relationship. I only reluctantly agreed, because she was willing to die for you. Duque, I'm not a jealous woman, but you have to know when to stop." I understand. Just as Duque was about to say something, Vanessa knocked on the door. "Master, Her Excellency Tyrant Whisperwind requests an audience." Duque felt a little strange. Because he could become a shadow priest, and to avoid suspicion, he had actually handed over his authority as the commander. After a short discussion, the highest commander of the alliance in Kalimdor was now Turayan. This was also a good example for the older Mograine to make way for Turayan, who was in his prime. If they were to encircle the Burning Legion in Fellwood Forest, Tyrant would have looked for Turayan and not him. "Ask her to wait in the conference hall. No, ask her to come to my wizard tower. After all, the relationship between the Night Elves and the Alliance isn't very stable." Jaina was a little more cautious. Duque couldn't help but look down. "Help me heal." Jaina glared at Duque fiercely. 15 minutes later, Duque, who was dressed formally, arrived at the lower level of the wizard tower with the two queens. He saw Tyrant, who was a little anxious. "Welcome to Theramore. How may I help you, Her Excellency Whisperwind?" Tyrant's exquisite face was filled with deep exhaustion. The destruction of an army of 100,000, the destruction of Mount Hyjal, the elimination of the Burning Legion, the resettlement of the refugees, and the disappearance of the dragon race's blessing due to the destruction of the World Tree. The Night Elves no longer had eternal life and youth. All these things were weighing heavily on her slender shoulders, making it hard for her to breathe. The joy of victory that could still be seen in the higher-ups of the Alliance was almost gone from her face. After all, the Alliance would at most worry about the compensation, but she had to worry about the future of the entire Night Elves. "I'm here this time to ask His Excellency Duke Marcus." Tyrant's expression suddenly changed halfway through her sentence. "Wait, what about your element?" Duque smiled bitterly. "I'm sorry. The moment I killed Archimonde, I suffered a backlash from the Demon Commander's curse. It took me a lot of effort to change the nature of the dark power he injected into my body, but I'm afraid I can only be a priest for now." Chapter 974. Tyrant first bowed deeply to Duque. "Thank you for your great contribution to the safety of the world of Azeroth." Despite her gratitude, Tyrant's eyes could not hide the sadness in them. In order to save the world of Azeroth, Duque did not hesitate to risk his final attack. She had seen it with her own eyes. Objectively speaking, this was definitely a feat worthy of praise. It was a feat worthy of being sung by bards for thousands of years. Unfortunately, it wasn't a good thing for the Night Elves at all. After thinking about it, Tyrant decided to say it out loud. Even though the explosion destroyed the World Tree, Nordrassil, the Well of Eternity, and Mount Hyjal, as the sacred mountain of the Night Elves for tens of thousands of years, Mount Hyjal has a very special place. The Cenarian Circle has already begun surveying to see if they can restore Mount Hyjal's vitality. The problem is that the explosion seemed to have caused the space to become unstable. Now there is a huge spatial rift at the top of the mountain. Spatial rift? Duque was a little confused. He was very sure that such a scene did not exist in the original history. However, since the explosion of the Well of Eternity had destroyed the ancient Kalimdor continent, and created the endless sea, it was not surprising that a spatial rift had appeared. Therefore, it wouldn't be too strange for a spatial rift to appear in this explosion that was just as earth-shattering and earth-shattering. Tyron deliberated for a moment. Perhaps you also know. Because the High Elves used to abuse arcane magic and conduct various forbidden experiments, the Night Elves and the High Elves who were good at arcane magic separated. Tyron tried to choose words that were not too provocative while paying attention to Queen Sylvanas' reaction. Sylvanas smiled. Please don't take it to heart. In order to take revenge on the Burning Legion, we have changed our name to Sindorii. The forbidden experiments you mentioned were actually banned by our elders 5,000 years ago, when a Nastrian Sunstrider was still in Quell Dorii. Tyrant heaved a sigh of relief. This made it easier to talk. There is not a single wizard among the Night Elves. We are not good at dealing with these problems, so we can only ask for help from the Alliance. The reason why I came to find you, Sir Marcus, is naturally because you are a Breaking Dawn great wizard. Even if you are no longer a wizard, I believe that your precious knowledge and experience can be of help to the Night Elves. Moreover, the Night Elves are very grateful for the Alliance's help this time. If possible, I hope that both sides can carry out further exchanges and cooperation. The Night Elves were testing the waters. After all, the three factions had just fought side by side, and the camaraderie between comrades would not fade so quickly. On the other hand, as a wise leader, Tyrant had an unspeakable worry: the expansion of the Horde's influence. In the eyes of most Night Elves, orcs, trolls, and Taurens were coarse, barbaric, and warlike. Now that the Burning Legion's demons were in front of them, the three factions naturally wouldn't be so stupid as to start a conflict. What if the demon wasn't here? In front of them was the simplest problem of survival and territory. To the south of Grey Valley, it was mostly barren land. Apart from the Night Elves' stronghold on Sodder Island in the southwest of the mainland, the Feathermoon stronghold, the Night Elves had almost no territorial claims on the entire south-central region of the Kalimdor mainland. It was different for the Horde. The Horde, freed from the control of the Alliance, would definitely usher in a period of explosive expansion in the following period of time. Tyrant could almost foresee the conflict between the Night Elves and the Horde in Grey Valley and the Stoneclaw Mountains in the future. The destruction of the World Tree, Nordrassil, caused the Night Elves to lose their immortality. For the Night Elves, who had an extremely long lifespan, this was not a big problem for the time being. If there was no war, because of immortality and the pursuit of freedom, the Night Elves' fertility rate was so low that it made one's hair stand on end. However, they had not adjusted their mentality from losing the blessing of immortality. This time, they had lost another 100,000 elites. If there was a continuous war, the Night Elves' population would not be able to cope with the meat grinder of war. In addition to the battle in Grey Valley, the Night Elves had lost the demigod Cenarius and nearly 10,000 elven hunters. The Night Elves and the Horde could be considered to have a huge grudge. However, they had just fought together, and the Taurens who believed in the doctrine of nature had joined the Horde. This made the Night Elves unable to find an excuse to start a war, even if they wanted to take advantage of the Horde's unstable footing. Was the new hatred and territorial conflict with the Horde more important? Or the so-called hatred from 8,000 years ago more important? Even an idiot would know which one to choose. Moreover, the High Elves were already ruled by the Ranger Queen, who was more inclined towards the nature element. Thus, it was almost inevitable to get close to the alliance that had crushed the Horde twice. History overlapped again, and it was inevitable. Duque was not surprised by Tyrant's probing. He smiled and replied on the spot. The Alliance is an organization that unites the various kingdoms and races with the highest common goal of the world of Azeroth's safety. Although I have temporarily resigned as the commander of the Alliance, I think the Alliance will be very happy to have deeper exchanges and cooperation with a peace-loving race like the Night Elves, who have a deep foundation and history. If there is a chance, the Alliance will also welcome the Night Elves to join the family of the Alliance. With Duque's status and identity, the two queens present also nodded in agreement. The general direction of this matter was considered to be set. Next, settling the spatial rift was a trivial matter. Duque agreed on the spot. Within 3 days he would organize a group of powerful wizards, such as Kale, Bats and the dragon wizard Krasis, to go together. The atmosphere of the meeting was so friendly and warm that both sides began to close the distance and call each other by name. Tyrant also took the opportunity to do Duque a favor. Duque actually. Other than teaching me how to fight, the moon goddess Elun also taught me a lot of skills in exorcism. If you don't mind, Duque, I can help you take a look at your state. If there are any remnants of evil power, I might be able to help you. Towards Tyrant's goodwill, Duque was a little annoyed. Professionals who use dark power had always been unpopular in the Alliance. Just look at the newly built Stormwind city. Warlocks could only hole up in the Lambs to the Slaughter hotel and play secret associations. Even after the destruction of the Dalajan and the Dalajan wizards and warlocks reconciled, the warlocks still received pitifully little training resources. The problem was that since Tyrant had put it this way, Duque could only stand up. Please don't get too excited about what happens next. I can still perfectly control this part of the dark power. Chapter 975. Tyrant swore. I swear that I will look at your new form and profession in the right light. In the end, you are making this sacrifice to save the world. I believe that I can understand and forgive your situation. Alright. There wasn't much energy fluctuation. In an instant, Duke, who had been protected by the golden light, suddenly turned into a dark humanoid figure. The power of darkness was so strong that it turned Duque's entire body black and illusory. However, Tyrant's expression changed drastically even though she had been talking nicely. She stood up, her face ashen, and her right hand subconsciously reached for the dagger at her waist. Unexpectedly, a ghostly figure was faster than Queen Sylvie, pressing down on the back of Tyrant's hand like lightning, making it impossible for her to unsheath the dagger. The one who made a move was naturally Vanessa, who had stepped into the hero domain. After obtaining a large pile of Seamount level epic equipment, her movements became even more agile and fast. Tyrant was stunned. She did not expect that the delicate and docile maid would have such frightening skills. It was definitely not a good thing for a hunter to be approached by a thief. However, what shocked her even more was Duque. She apologized softly. I'm sorry, I was too agitated. It's not because of your form, Sir Marcus, but because of your appearance. I have no choice but to recall a very, very bad memory. Duque waved his hand, and Vanessa retreated. Duque had actually noticed that Tyrant had begun to address him in an unfamiliar manner. Tyrant, when we first met, you seemed to have a very deep prejudice against me. But looking at my life's memories, that was really the first time I met a night elf. I believe that my ancestors and I should not have any conflicts with the night elves. If there really is a personal grudge, I hope that we can discuss it openly. We cannot let misunderstandings affect the exchange and cooperation between the two major forces. Tyrant took a few deep breaths, her full chest trembling. However, her once clear eyes were still filled with resentment and entanglement that seemed to come from ancient times. After hesitating for a long time, she sat down and calmed herself down. In the end, she took out an item wrapped in a mysterious power. It was an unusually shriveled banana. Queen Sylvie and Jaina could not understand why Tyrant had taken out a broken banana that should have been thrown into the bin. However, Duque cried out involuntarily, "Air-dried bananas?" There was something called courting death in this world. If you don't seek it, you won't die. Why did Duque have to court death? In less than half a second, Tyrant let Duque and the two queens experience what it meant to change the weather. Tyrant stood up immediately. Her eyes were filled with rage and humiliation, and the two queens had no doubt that if they were not in Jaina's mage tower, Tyrant would have used her ultimate skill, Meteor Shower, or Starfall, at any moment to blast Duke into smithereens. Tyrant was so agitated that the sound of her teeth chattering could be heard in the silence of the room. Tyrant's anger was off the charts. Everyone in the room could clearly see her clenching her fists. Her muscles were so taut that he could see every muscle bulging from the tension on her exposed skin. Her beautiful biceps, the distinct abdominal muscles and mermaid lines between her breastplate and belt, and the graceful muscle lines on her lower body that did not affect the visual field made Duque drool. No, he was drooling in fear. At this moment, Duque was dumbfounded. He could not understand why Tyrande would be so agitated by a joke that only existed among the players in his past life. She was so agitated that she wanted to kill him. Thinking back to the time before his transmigration, Duque had asked himself many times why he played games. There were only two answers. First, it was for fun. Second, it was because he was bored and needed to kill time. As a result, all kinds of annoying and asshole-tightening games were developed. Duque borrowed a thief account and dared to sneak into the Earthy Highlands, which was part of the Horde's territory, Hammerfall. There, Duque met an orc who was a bandage master. Back then, the bandage master quest was very painful. If he made a mistake, he would have to start all over again. It was very painful. As an honest and reliable young man, Duque took advantage of the fact that the cute orc player had already saved many NPCs and was about to complete his quest to ambush him. He killed the player and made him fail the quest, forcing him to start all over again. 10 minutes later, Duque did it again later. The poor Horde player even opened a new account to the Iron Stove Fort and scolded the poor guy who lent his account to Duque for being immoral and having a baby without a pair of eyes. Sigh. Now that he thought about it, it was all because of his youth. However, this reflected how often the thieves from the Horde and the Alliance went to each other's territories to have friendly exchanges. The air-dried banana incident was vaguely remembered. A Horde thief went to the main cities of the Alliance and took advantage of the main city leaders to steal items. One had to know that thieves had to use all sorts of stolen chests to practice lockpicking. Only then would they feel the greatest sense of accomplishment. When the thief was wandering around Darnassus, he passed by Tyrande's body and found a dried banana on her body. It was normal for a leader boss to have all kinds of drops. The problem was that Tyrande was a female and she had many fans. From 2007 to 2017, Tyrande had been in the top 10 most fantasized about by male Warcraft players. Even after 10 years, she still appeared in all kinds of 18x manga. She was known as the model worker of the Filthy Witch world. Under the buff of this halo, everything changed because of this banana. This banana was now in the World of Azeroth Museum's collection, and was named World of Azeroth's 10 Most Influential Items in 2007. Or rather, a tool. Duque really wanted to convince himself that bananas were just fruits. After all, when he was in high school, he had seriously explained S to a particularly stupid girl. And was Superman meaning Superman. This caused the girl to foolishly say, "I also like S." Things got out of hand. Alright. I digressed. Anyway, Duque said that bananas were just fruits and was slapped away by everyone. Chapter 976. When all the topics revolved around the banana, public opinion reached an all-time high. For example, the fruit stall in front of Tyrande's palace in Darnassus was booming. Insider X and the stall owner revealed that the dried bananas on Tyrande's body were bought from this stall. Naturally, business was so good that the stall owner hired a team of 500 goblins to transport the bananas. There were fans who came to Tyrande's palace after hearing the news. There were fans who bought many baskets of bananas and expressed their love for Tyrande. There were also peddlers who were jealous of the stall owner's business and told Tyrande that bananas were not as good as cucumbers. Those who used it would know. In summary, because the bananas changed the mindset and behavior of many perverted players, a large number of tourists, fanatical fans, and various spies flocked to Darnassus. Of course, the ones who benefited the most were the fruit stall owner and the residents and peddlers of Darnassus. Because of this, their wallets were filled to the brim. Per capita GDP increased by 4,000%. Later, historians and economists unanimously named this period of prosperity as the Age of Bananas. 500 years later, a huge monument in the shape of a banana was erected in the plaza in front of Tyrande's palace. It was also named as one of the 10 wonders of Azeroth. Many young and rebellious elves announced that they believed in the banana god and preached in front of the monument. Historians, scholars, and the Men's Rights Association jointly declared that this was a symbol of the rise of the elven male race. Of course, the above information about the dried bananas was all bullsh*t. This was because the air-dried banana story was a fabricated piece of history. Even the air-dried banana comic was made up by a few stupid cartoonists based on this story. It wasn't the official history of Azeroth at all. Why would Tyron fly into a rage because of the words dried bananas? Duque was completely dumbfounded. Tyron seemed to be using a great deal of willpower to suppress her outburst. Even though Duque's loss of voice just now seemed to be gradually proving that Duque was the bastard that she dreamed of every night, she still lacked a very crucial piece of evidence. Tyron stood in front of Duque, and the others like a volcano that was about to erupt. She spent a lot of effort telling herself to stay calm, to stay calm. After a while, her heaving chest finally calmed down. Tyron sensed the undisguised hostility in the eyes of the female servant who was obviously a hero-tier thief, then looked at the two queens who were ready to attack at any moment, and then looked at Duque who was still a little confused. Tyron suddenly realized that she had made a big fuss over a minor issue. Tyrande was vexed. Oh, Tyrande. Tyrande. No matter how suspicious Duke Marcus was, even if he claimed to have resigned from his position as commander, he was still a Grand Duke of a kingdom. He was still the leader of the incomparably powerful alliance. How could I shed all pretenses of cordiality with Duque over such a private matter? Tyrande shuddered. She did not dare to imagine what the consequences would be if the Night Elves offended both the Alliance and the Horde. Tyrande quivered, and her imposing manner dissipated. She sat down again, a little dispirited. My apologies, please forgive my rash and extreme actions. As this concerns an important private matter that concerns my reputation, I hope to meet with Sir Marcus alone. Impossible. Queen Sylvie retorted resolutely. Do you think that the people of the Alliance are fools or blind? Don't tell me that you didn't have killing intent just now. Jaina's expression was even colder, and she directly pierced through the last layer of concealment. Even Jaina, who was usually tactful, had such a huge reaction. One could well imagine how much Tyrande's killing intent provoked the two queens. My sincere apologies again. Tyrande deliberated for a moment, and took out 2 scrolls. These are the scrolls of my unique battle technique, True Shot Halo, and a letter from an arcanist of the High Elves that can be traced back to ancient times. I hope that this can slightly alleviate the uneasiness and confusion that my rudeness just now caused you. True Shot Halo was definitely a good thing. Sylvanas, who had fought alongside Tyrande, had personally experienced how powerful it was to increase one's attack power by nearly 30%. As for the magic letter, it was even more impressive. Magic was originally exclusive to the Blue Dragons led by Malygos. After it was spread, the Pharaoh, who was the most proficient and oldest in magic, were the High Elves. Attention! They were the High Elves led by Queen Azhara, more than 10,000 years ago. The ones who crossed the Endless Sea and arrived at the Lordaeron continent were the High Elves who had already been shaved once. Sylvanas and Jaina frowned. Tyrande was definitely not normal. This kind of immature action was not something that a veteran leader, who had led the Night Elves for tens of thousands of years, should do. While the gift had been prepared in advance, it was most likely that it had been used to improve her personal relationship with the leader of the Night Elves. Now it had become a remedy. The only explanation was that this personal matter had a huge impact on Tyrande, enough to cause her to lose control. The two queens looked at each other, and Queen she spoke. We will cautiously accept your gift of apology for the time being, but we are Duque's partners. We do not think that there is anything that Duque cannot tell us. We cannot accept your request for the rest to leave. In other words, it was better for her to lay her cards on the table. Otherwise, they would rather choose not to accept the gift. And depending on your situation, it would determine our and even the entire Alliance's attitude towards you. This was actually forcing Tyrande into a dead end. Was her personal grudge more important than the future of the Night Elves? She had to make a choice. Taking 3 deep breaths, Tyrande forced herself to calm down. Biting her lips, she said, "This is indeed a private matter, but it is very important to me. Please try your best to answer my question honestly. This is a huge question that has been bothering me for countless years." Duque returned to his normal state and sat upright. "Ask away. As long as it does not involve the secrets of the Alliance, I do not mind answering honestly. You. How old are you? Are you a pure human? Tyrant asked in a trembling voice. Huh. Tyrant's question left Duke and the two queens scratching their heads. Duke answered honestly. A 29-year-old human, that's right. I don't think I'm a mixed blood. Age before transmigration did not count. Although he was still a year away from turning 30, he was still barely in the realm of uncles. Tyrant seemed to secretly sigh in relief. The lifespan of humans seems very short, right? Chapter 977. Jaina, who had just used Nozdorma's blessing to return to her 18 years of age, blushed. Very few humans can live past 100 years. Of course, the former guardian Egwene used powerful magic to maintain her life, but no human has ever lived past 1,000 years. Tyrant asked tentatively, 10,000 years. Is it impossible? No. Yes. Yes. Humans are not elves. Jaina said resolutely. Besides, the humans of Azeroth 10,000 years ago were still savages. Humans began to possess intelligence and know how to make weapons more than 5,000 years ago. It was only 2,800 years ago that Thoradin the Great united the human clans, and humans became one of the masters of this world. Duke was naturally not 10,000 years old, but the special 10,000 years reminded Duke of a very important part of the original storyline. Why did I suddenly feel a little flustered? Tyrant seemed to be unwilling to give up. Then, is Sir Marcus from Azeroth? Or was your ancestor from Azeroth? Sylvanas finally lost her temper. She stood up abruptly and stomped in front of Tyrant. She placed her hands on her hips and glared at Tyrant like a ferocious beast. Her queen's aura was fully unleashed. Your Excellency, Tyrant Whisperwind. We don't find it interesting that you are beating around the bush to get information from Duke. You can either confess to every detail of this matter, or you can pretend that it never happened. Please note that you are accusing the Grand Duke of Stormwind, whose fief is even larger than Mount Hyjal. Tyrant's expression could be said to be marvelous. Finally, after realizing that her rashness might lead to serious consequences, she hesitated for a while before speaking. It was 10,000 years ago, when Queen Azhara led Sargeraz's Burning Legion to invade the world of Azeroth. In that battle, Tyrant was unfortunately captured. Originally, she thought that she was destined to die tragically. However, an incomparably mysterious human of unknown origins found her, who was already poisoned and infected with a terrifying curse. For freedom and life, she paid a heavy price. Tyrant refused to divulge the details. It's a man called Duke Kong. Like Duke, he can use the power of shadow and light. He is at once my benefactor, and at the same time the man I hate. That's right, he did save me from being killed by the devil. But soon after I agreed to his conditions, I realized that even if he didn't do anything, Malfurion would arrive. But because of this, of course he could have chosen to kill me. In that case, it's impossible for Malfurion to revive me when I'm poisoned. So I'm very conflicted. Even though Tyrant's words were vague and incoherent, the two queens could understand how she felt when she was at a disadvantage. Jaina rolled her eyes and flirtatiously winked at Duke. Yo, Duke. Fortunately, you can't go back to 10,000 years ago, otherwise I would have thought that Dukong was you. Tyrant's face had turned green from Queen Sylvie's interrogation. On the other side, Duque found that his mind was about to be separated from his body. At this moment, he roughly understood what was going on. Damn it, the person Tyrant was referring to as Dukong was definitely him. After all, Chinese people always like to put gold on their faces. Duque didn't have Du Fu's talent, but he had a good alcohol tolerance. He could drink 2 liters of 50% white wine without panting. Back then Duque was full of class. Therefore, Dukong became Duke's QQ username when he was in university. Whenever there was a drinking occasion, he would use 2 identical glasses to pour a glass of Sprite and a glass of white wine. Bottoms up, you can do whatever you want. That heroic spirit would definitely cause internal injuries to people who couldn't drink. Even though he didn't have that much money to drink high alcohol, humans always had dreams. Naturally, Duke's dream was to drink more Dukong. Dukong is the only one who can solve my problems. This was Duke's catchphrase. Alright, the culprit was out. Duke, who was familiar with history, pieced the whole thing together. The first time he met Tyrant in Grey Valley, he was targeted. For some unknown reason, Dooku had entered the ancient war that happened 10,000 years ago in the original history. Of course, it was because Duke and the others had returned to the past and stopped the collapse of history that the current Azeroth was created. In other words, the Duke who had returned to the past must have succeeded. Otherwise, Azeroth would have been a world destroyed by the Burning Legion. Here came the problem. The Duke who had returned to the past must have done something to Tyrant. Otherwise, Tyrant wouldn't have immediately revealed such a hateful expression when she saw the current Duke. Come to think of it, the current Duke had been wronged. Because the future Duke had gone to the past 10,000 years to cause trouble, the current Duke had to take the blame. What? What kind of bullshit was this? This was similar to the incident where the current version of the Time King Nozdormu killed the future Nozdormu, causing the two Nozdormu to die together. The worst part was that this was indeed the sin of him. But Duke didn't even know what he had done to Tyrant after returning to the past. Even if he wanted to fix the problem, he couldn't do it. He didn't know if he could return to the past and not cause such a mess. Duke's balls hurt. But confessing to something as stupid as this was not something Duke would do. Confessing would result in severe punishment. Resisting would result in going home for the new year. Duke definitely understood this logic. Thinking of this, Duke had an idea. The silent best actor Duke made his move. He stood up, his handsome face facing the sky at a 45-degree angle. 2 drops of crocodile tears flowed down his face, after being slightly stimulated by the system elf. He slowly walked to Tyrant, who was sitting on a chair, and pressed his hands on her shoulder plate in an exaggerated manner. Your Excellency Tyrant Whisperwind. I want to say that before yesterday, I was a Breaking Dawn wizard respected by tens of thousands of people, a great hero respected and worshipped by tens of millions of people in the Alliance, the highest commander of the Alliance. But look, what am I today? A freak who possesses both the power of darkness and light. Because of this, I had no choice but to resign from my position as commander of the Alliance. I even had to bear the criticism of the people of Theramore, my homeland and my homeland. Duke's words struck Tyrant, who was already in a mess. That's right. It was only yesterday that Duke became a shadow priest. Why did I suspect him? An indescribable sense of guilt welled up in Tyrant's heart, and she didn't dare to look at Duke directly. Chapter 978. The Movie King continued his performance. When Archimonde climbed the world tree that the Night Elves, and even the entire world cherished, when all the other heroes were helpless against Archimonde, who had started to absorb the power of the world tree, you all turned your expectant gazes to me. When Duke said this, Tyrant shuddered. She lowered her head, not daring to look at Duke directly. That's right, at that time, there were those who looked at Duke with anticipation, or rather, forced him to make the final blow. Tyrant was one of them. I didn't let you down. I didn't let down the billions of lives in the world of Azeroth. Even though I knew that I would definitely suffer the backlash of Archimonde's death, I didn't hesitate. Even today, even though I've become a monster of light and evil in the eyes of others, I've never regretted it, because I sacrificed myself for the world. Such an open and honest speech. Such a righteous and awe-inspiring aura. In front of Duke, Tyrant was too ashamed to show her face. She felt that she was a despicable, evil woman. Even though they looked almost identical, Duke was a superhero who risked his soul to save the world. Moreover, the time and condition didn't match. How could she doubt him? What's wrong with me? Unlike Duke's crocodile tears, Tyrant's tears were really flowing. She covered her face and let her tears flow freely. She kept saying, I'm sorry. I'm sorry. I've misunderstood you. It's really my fault. I shouldn't have doubted a hero like you. Duke retracted his hands and turned around. With his hands behind his back, he showed Tyrant an incomparably tall and broad back. Since you've confirmed that it's a misunderstanding, that's good. In the past, I definitely didn't do any evil deeds that purposely hurt good people. But in the future, I might be corrupted by the power of darkness and do some terrible things. I hope that one day in the future, you can forgive me and give me a quick end on account of the fact that I once saved the world, and then leave a sufficiently fair and objective epitaph on my tombstone. That's enough. What was a hero? This was a hero. Even if he was trapped in an evil curse, his body was still broken, but his will was strong. That awe-inspiring righteousness was simply a role model for mortals in the world. Regardless of whether Duque believed it or not, the 4 women in the room all believed it. When Duque said this, Tyrande was not the only one crying. Even Servanas and Jaina were deeply moved. They could not control themselves and rushed into Duque's embrace, crying nonstop. Vanessa, on the other hand, was secretly wiping her tears in the corner of the room. Regardless of whether or not Duque would seek death in the future, with this foreshadowing, even if Duque were to be exposed in the future, he probably wouldn't have to die. Maybe I'll die once or twice or something. That was the end of the matter. The Alliance army, together with the Night Elves and less than 10,000 orc elites, were chasing after the demon army in Fellwood Forest. 3 days later, only a few heroes came to Mount Hyjal, as well as Tyrande and less than 500 sentries from the Moon Goddess Temple. A few days ago, this was the final battlefield of the battle with the Burning Legion. As the center of that shocking explosion, the entire mountain peak was almost turned to dust. Because of the explosion, the mountain peak that was once like a basin had been lowered by at least 50 meters. The originally lush basin on the mountaintop was now a desolate ruin without any plants or water. But Duque knew that this scorched ruin would become a holy land in a few decades. The famous Nordrassil Inn would be built here. Letting out a soft sigh, Duque looked at the 15-meter-wide spiral-shaped spatial rift floating in midair, and suddenly felt a little pain in his balls. Yet another unknown change. The shift of the world was completely out of control. Even the system elf could not estimate how much of the overlap was left. Now the most knowledgeable mages in the world, or rather the most imaginative mages in the field of mystery, were all here. Duque, Jaina, Ronan, Kael'Vats and Krasus all walked around the portal. Will this be the second dark portal? Tyrande was very nervous. Although Nordrassil was destroyed, in the eyes of the Night Elves, it was still a holy land. It was not fun to have spatial rifts that kept running out of demons or evil creatures in the Holy Land. Kael'Vats was the first to give up. He used to be the elf prince, but he had spent most of his talent points on politics. His major was fire. Ronan was also sighing. He was an arcanist, but he was also more focused on fighting. His extra talent points were all spent on diplomacy. In the 10 years that Duque had been missing, he had been busy maintaining the relationship between the Cursed Lands Overwatch Castle and the Dalajan. Jaina, on the other hand, had made great progress in spatial magic under Egwene's guidance. She thought for a moment and said, "This used to be the Well of Eternity. The high concentration of mana here supports this portal. There is indeed a possibility of interplanetary teleportation." Krasus glanced at Duque and suddenly laughed. "Let me speak first. Otherwise, if Duque speaks, I will lose all face." Duque smiled and did not speak. To make this the second dark portal, there must be 2 conditions. First, there must be a large and stable spatial rift here. Second, there must be a stable source of mana. At this point, Krasus raised 2 fingers and said, "Neither of the 2 conditions are met, so it's incomplete. This place is too unstable." "How so?" Tyrande asked. Krasus smiled but did not speak. As if he wanted to test Duque, he raised his chin at Duque. In Duque's vision, green data flowed down like a waterfall. Very soon, Duque had an accurate answer. "If we don't do anything, nothing will happen here. But if a demigod mage or warlock interferes, this place will be dangerous." Duque suddenly spat. He thought that if he were still a Breaking Dawn mage, with his and the system elf shocking control, he could use this incomparably rare and spatial mana to bring Aurelia and Sasha back. Thinking of this, he became extremely frustrated. He still had some hope. "Krasus, if we can get Maligos or Nozdormu to help, we might be able to use this power to bring your queen back to Azeroth." Chapter 979. Hearing this, Crassus's eyes lit up. He could not contain the excitement in his heart. It had been 10 years. He had lost contact with the queen he loved for a full 10 years. It would be a lie to say that he did not blame Duque. If not for Duque deceiving his queen with a new toy, Alexstrasza would not have been blasted into the void with Karazhan. Now that he heard that there was hope for the queen, Crassus was so happy that his heart almost flew out of his chest. Wait for me one day. It was no secret among the higher-ups of the Alliance that he was a dragon. However, when he transformed, he almost scared Tyrande and her sentinels. In front of everyone, Crassus stretched out his arm. At first, it looked like he was stretching out human skin, but it grew longer and longer. At the same time, his slender fingers turned into red claws covered in protrusions and cuticles. His back arched quickly, and a pair of red bat wings shot out from both sides of his shoulders at the same time. His body seemed to be blown by the wind, growing rapidly until he looked like a large red lizard. In just 3 or 4 seconds, Crassus grew bigger and bigger. He was the size of 4 people, 5 people, and then 10 people. Immediately, all humans and elves seemed very small in front of him. Just like that, radiant moon wizard Crassus turned into a dragon, Calistras. With a flap of his wings, he soared into the sky and disappeared into the clouds in a few breaths. Duque recovered from his raised state and looked away. Only then did he realize that the night elf sentinels had all knelt on the ground. Even Tyrande, the high priest of the moon goddess, was bowing. This was a sign of respect for the dragons. After all, it was the blessings of the 3 dragon aspects that gave the night elves eternal life and eternal youth, as well as 10,000 years of prosperity. Tyrande had naturally heard of Duke's relationship with the dragons in this period of time. What one hears may be false, but seeing is believing. Seeing Duque make an ancient dragon run errands for him with a single suggestion, one could imagine how important Duque's words were to the life-giver. Moreover, Mount Hyjal had just been destroyed, and the scorched land needed Alexstrasza's support even more. Tyrande could not help but look at Duque with a hint of respect in her eyes. Waiting was boring. Of course, Jaina and Ronan looked at this spatial crack with great interest. Kale, that's brought a large group of his followers to a resting tent. Duque was a little surprised to notice that Solarian, who was beside Kale, was actually wearing a mage robe that did not match the blood elves and high elves. Although it looked like the mage robes of Stormwind City, the color and style were more similar to Vanessa's maid robes. What was even more eye-catching was the medal of the Marcus family pinned on Solarian's chest. Solarian walked up to Duque and knelt down on one knee. This time she didn't speak in Elvish, but in standard human language. Respected hero Duke Marcus. According to the ancient oath that I, Solarian, made on the Salus Trail, as long as my lord Kale, can restore his reputation in the Battle of Mount Hyjal, I am willing to be your servant for the rest of my life. Now the great astromancer Solarian has come as promised. Please take me in, Master Marcus. If Solarian had not mentioned it, Duque would have forgotten about it. Now that he thought about it, she was serious. Duque was a little confused. He said in a trembling voice, Kale, that's this. Am I stealing your follower? The martial force Kale, to smile gently and slowly shook his head. No. Duque, you don't understand the ancient customs of the High Elves. If a follower can use himself as a price in exchange for a new life for his master, this is a great honor for a follower. Not only Kale, but Caponia, Tyrannicus, and other followers behind him also nodded at the same time. Caponia had tears in her eyes, but said with a smile, Lord Marcus, we are actually very envious of Solarian, who can make such a great contribution to our master who is in a desperate situation. Although we are more grateful to you, Lord Marcus. As she spoke, she was already sobbing. Kale, stepped forward, gently took Duque's right hand, and then put Duque's hand on Solarian's head. This feeling was very strange, and Duque almost withdrew his hand. Kale, explained. If Solarian's new master is you, whether it is me, my followers, or Solarian herself, we are all very willing. To be honest, if it weren't for the large number of followers following me, I would want to become your follower. So please accept Solarian as your maid. Hearing Kale say this, Duque still felt that it was very strange. As a transmigrator, although it was very cool to accept the second boss of the historical Storm stronghold as a maid, he still felt that something was wrong. Isn't it a bit too corrupt? The somewhat honest Kale That's did not see that Duque the slut was actually being unreasonable. He even foolishly persuaded Duque, just accept her. Aren't you a priest now? Isn't it very inconvenient to teleport? It would be great if he accepted her. Besides, if you refuse to accept her, Solarian will be regarded by her compatriots as an untrustworthy and extremely despicable exile. She is a lowly existence that is even worse than a slave. Caponia and the other loyal followers of the prince unexpectedly knelt down and pleaded in unison with Duque. Lord Marcus, please reconsider. If we can take Solarian in, it will be her glory, and the glory of all of us followers. Solarian had already burst into tears. Master Marcus, please have mercy. Accept me. Otherwise, I have nowhere to go. The best actor Duque let out a long sigh and pretended to accept his fate. Before Solarian did not come, Duque was really worried. Of course, he could command Ronan and Jaina to work. But Ronan had to take his place to control the Dalajan, and Jaina herself was a queen. After being used to teleportation, suddenly having to run was really unbearable. Duque gently stroked Solarian's head. All right, you will be my maid from now on. When the time is right, I will let you go out and take charge. Thank you, master. Solarian knelt down deeply, her forehead touching the ground. Then, in front of everyone, Kale used a small pair of scissors that Caponia handed him to cut a small piece of the luxurious gold-trimmed sleeve. Caponia then handed this piece of cloth to Solarian, who raised her hands high. Solarian held this piece of cloth, and her tears flowed even harder. Your Highness Kale please forgive Solarian. I can no longer serve you. Kale was moved and nodded heavily. Go. Duque is a good master. You must serve him wholeheartedly for the rest of your life. If you betray us, let alone the Marcus family, we will definitely hunt you down, even to the end of the universe. Yes, I will. Chapter 980. Duke, who was once a university student, had a very extravagant and cliché dream. He wanted to return to ancient times and become an ignorant and incompetent hedonist with the strongest backing. He wanted to bring a group of epic-ranked combat power with him all day long. He wanted to go out on the streets and harm the girls of other families. Well, now that he couldn't be a villain, it felt good to be a hero. Behind him was Vanessa and Solarian, two extremely powerful girls. Even the kings of the Alliance couldn't find such a bodyguard team. Especially the Radiant Moon Pharaoh. They were all old men. How could they compare to the girls by Duque's side? Looking at Duke's expression as though he was a patient and needed to rest, Jaina rolled her eyes at Duke as he rested casually with two maids serving behind him. However, after the two of them finished researching the secrets of the magic circuit that night, even if they were just rolling their eyes, it still felt like they were flirting. They had thought that they would have to wait for a whole day. Unexpectedly, Krasis returned in half a day. I bring good news and bad news. Krasis, who had turned back into his human form, could not hide his exhaustion. Tyrant had wanted to hear the good news first, but she gritted her teeth and chose to listen to the bad news first, just like Duque. Krasis sighed. The Burning Legion seems to be angry because of Archimonde's death. They sent a rather large fleet to attack the defensive magic circle of the world of Azeroth. In the void, where mortals can't see, Malygos is fighting on the front lines. He's also slightly injured, and he refuses to help. Duque's eyes narrowed. He can't even use this magic to summon the Red Dragon Queen? An angry expression appeared on Krasis' face. Yes. He rejected me decisively and then chased me away. After a pause he continued. I'm guessing that the matter with Syndagosa angered him. All right, the Blue Dragon Queen's grave had been dug up. Malygos was very unhappy. Even if Syndagosa's soul had fallen and hated him, he was unhappy. He refused to help. It was hard to tell if he resented the Dragon Slumber Shrine for not taking care of his wife's remains, or if he resented Alexstras's return, and the Dragon King suppressing him again. In any case, this path was blocked. Where's Izura? Although Izura was not part of Duke's plan, he still asked symbolically. The Emerald Dream is still in trouble. Duke pursed his lips. This was already 2 pieces of bad news. Then the good news comes from Nozdormu? Tyrant asked. Yes. Nozdormu is willing to help, but his condition is for you to help him, Duke. As if he had stepped on an invisible tail, Duke jumped up. Azeroth above, he wants me to work extra hours to save his sister? Krasus puffed out his chest and sucked in his stomach. His Majesty Nozdormu's words. Everyone held their breaths and prepared to listen. Of course I'm willing to save Alexstrasza. If you don't want to do this, Duke, then I'll only save Alexstrasza. This time, Duke wasn't just being stepped on, he was being set on fire. He and Queen Sylvie, who had rushed over after hearing that there was a chance to save her sisters, cursed in unison. Nozdormu, you bastard. Only save the Red Dragon Queen? What a joke. Wouldn't that mean that Aurelia and Sasha would all die? After all, after being blown into the void, apart from relying on Karazhan's own defense, the Red Dragon Queen was the key to protecting Karazhan. It wasn't just to destroy the enemies, but also the void. There was no light or heat, water or air in the void. Without her, the life-giver, Karazhan might not completely collapse, but it would not be able to grow plants and animals. Without plants and animals, there would be no food. The people inside were destined to starve to death. No, they didn't even have to wait until they starved to death. Without plants to absorb carbon dioxide and expel oxygen to circulate the air, everyone would suffocate to death. Nozdormu was simply threatening Duke. Originally, Duke's anger was rising, but it was suddenly extinguished by Krasus' words. His Majesty Nozdormu also said that he has cleaned up your mess enough times. This time, you have to help even if you don't want to. Otherwise, he won't stop certain existences. In the ears of outsiders, this sentence was a little nonsensical, but in Duke's ears, it was a little horrifying. Who wouldn't stop? Wasn't it those guys who came back from the future to fix history? The guy who turned history upside down was none other than me. Duke glanced at Sylvanas, who was still alive and had not become a Forsaken. He then looked at Kael, Bats, who didn't know why Duke was looking at him. He then looked at Vanessa and Solarian, the bosses who should have died tragically. Duke suddenly sighed. No matter what, he was the one who messed up history. Twisting history felt so good. He would be in tears when he paid the bill. Okay, now you're suffering, right? Duke went all out in grief and indignation. Okay, stop talking. I'll go, okay? Hearing that Duke agreed to jump into the pit, Krasus also let out a long sigh of relief. Although he could save his queen no matter what worried him the most was the thing that Nozdormu gave him. Krasus took out a piece of dragon scale fragment with a dim yellow glow and placed it on the table. What His Majesty Nozdormu asked you to do is all here. Please gather an elite team to help. Of course, for your peace of mind, His Majesty will first pull Karazhan back from the void and seal this spatial rift before you go. As soon as Krasus finished speaking, Queen Sylvanas rushed up and pressed her fiery red lips against Duke's. Immediately, a series of passionate kisses began. Duke, thank you. Thank you. Queen Sylvanas's longing for her sister had long ago made her forget everything else. Duke smiled happily. Your sister is also my woman. Queen Sylvanas said a little coquettishly. I don't care, I'm happy anyway. Krasus looked at Duke enjoying himself, and was also very envious. He didn't want to disturb Duke. The ceremony is set for 8 o'clock tonight. I'll go and prepare the magic circle first. At this time, a group of druids came in a majestic manner. Although it was only the first time they met, Duke immediately recognized the guy leading the group. It was the Archdruid Fandral Staghelm, who was famous for protecting his followers to the point of madness, and eventually fell. Chapter 981. Fandral recognized the owner of the dragon scale almost immediately and ran over. Is His Majesty Nozdormu in need of help? The Night Elves are happy to help. As soon as Fandral opened his mouth, Tyron's expression became a little unnatural. The night elves worshipped the laws of nature, and hated the abuse of arcane spells, and the destruction of nature. This was a tradition since ancient times. Among the night elves, other than the moon goddess Elun and the nature demigod Cenarius, the night elves also worshipped the 3 dragon aspects that had blessed the world tree. However, Fandral had gone a little overboard. He was basically saying that the night elves were willing to use all their power to lick Nozdormu's boots. Moreover, it had only been 2 days since the explosion of Mount Hyjal, and Fandral had already started advocating among the night elves to plant another world tree, so that the 3 dragon aspects could once again bless them with magic. Now that Fandral was trying to curry favor with Nozdormu, Tyrande was infuriated by this seemingly generous, but actually unprincipled way of doing things. After all, in Tyrande's eyes, everything had to be prioritized. The first thing the night elves had to do was to eliminate dangers, such as eliminating the demon army and removing the spatial cracks. Only then would they have to rebuild. Now that both sides had not been done, Fandral had jumped out and said that he would unconditionally support Nozdormu's operation? Please, you don't even know what Nozdormu is going to do, and you're saying that you're going to support the entire night elves? No matter how good-tempered Tyrande was, she could not hold it in any longer. However, she could not do anything because during the years when Malfurion was wandering in the Emerald Dream, Fandral, as Malfurion's eldest disciple, had actually controlled the Cenarian Circle. Even when Malfurion returned, because Malfurion was more focused on the natural domain, the mundane affairs were still handed over to Fandral. It was true that the night elves were a perverted race, but the teachings of the moon goddess and the teachings of the druids existed side by side. Hence, even though Tyrande was the high priestess, she couldn't make the night elves her own decision. Fandral made random promises, and just when Tyrande was about to say something, Fandral was slapped in the face by Krasis, or more accurately, by Nozdormu. Seeing that Fandral was about to touch the yellow dragon scale, Krasis stopped him. Sorry, the Time King has made it clear that no night elves can participate in this operation. Fandral Staghelm's complexion was so wonderful that it looked as though someone had smeared ketchup and soy sauce all over his face. Retribution should not come too fast. Just as they expressed their desire to curry favor, the other side was slapped in the face by the Dragon Clan. This was not an admonition, but a warning. Not only did Krasis stop them, but he also released his dragon's might without concealment. This was the dragon might of an ancient dragon. The weaker elven huntresses and archers who were standing guard nearby were all suffocated by the pressure. Fandral could not, and did not dare to lose his temper. After all, Krasis did not represent his own dragon, but the will of the entire Wyrmrest Shrine. He could only pinch his nose and accept it. Since this is the will of His Majesty Nozdormu, then please do as you wish. With that, Fandral actually bowed to Krasis and left with his people without even looking at Duque. From the beginning to the end, he really treated Duque and his people like air. Ronan gritted his teeth. Humph. Queen Sylvanas and Jaina snorted coldly at the same time. Even the most good-tempered Kale, Thats could not help but twitch his mouth for a while. He only stopped when he saw that Duque did not say anything. Tyrande had no choice but to apologize to Fandral. I'm sorry, Mr. Marcus. Fandral is the most radical nature supremacist. He hates anyone and anything that destroys nature. Also, he hates arcanists. Tyrande apologized to Fandral. Duque waved his hand. It's fine. I know. Compared to the return of Her Majesty Alexstrasza and my lover and companion, these are all trivial matters. Tyrande bowed again and apologized. At this time, Duque finally reached out to touch the yellow dragon scale. Almost at the moment he touched the dragon scale, Duque heard an incomparably tragic howl in his spiritual sea. That was the Dragon King's howl of pain. Duque's facial muscles twitched, even though he had already asked the system elf to create 9 mental barriers in his spiritual sea in advance. The information that rushed in like a flood still broke through his 7 defenses in one breath. If it was someone with weak mental strength, they would not be able to resist in time, and would become mentally disabled. Terrifying images appeared in Duque's mind. It was as if Nozdormu, the King of Time, with a body as large as a mountain, had appeared in front of him. Nozdormu's body was different from the previous time when he besieged Nethario, the wing of death. Although as a special giant dragon formed from sand, his body was never the kind that was blinding. The feeling of the dragon's scales that seemed to have been eroded by the wind for thousands of years, and could rot and fall off at any time still shocked Duque greatly. The life force of the dragon of time was time. As the king of time, he could not resist the erosion of time. How bad was Nozdorma's current state? Duque saw sand on the dragon's face, and the dragon's skin peeled off like broken plaster. Looking at the very human-like expression of despair on Nozdorma's face, Duque was extremely shocked. The illusory images in the spiritual world did not affect his vision in reality. Duque also saw the worry on Krasis' face. It was obvious that it was Duque's turn to see the illusions that Krasis had seen and experienced. Nozdorma did not speak. His figure disappeared, and instead, an incomparably large continent appeared. It was a vast continent in the atmosphere that one could not see the end of. There were incomparably steep mountains and plains full of forests. As his field of vision gradually rose until it reached the universe, he could see the entire continent. Only then did Duke realize that this was the continent of Kalimdor. It was not the current Kalimdor, but the ancient Kalimdor continent before the War of the Ancients. The information that came from the dragon's scale made it easy for Duque to determine that it was the source of Nozdorma's pain. Even though he was mentally prepared, Duque still cursed in his heart. The War of the Ancients? *CKME. Ever since the Dark Portal opened for the first time, Azeroth kept causing trouble, but please, Goddess of Fate, don't make me fight the Burning Legion twice in a row. Just thinking about it made me speechless. After seeing these images, Duque suddenly returned to reality. Although he had only been immersed in the spiritual world for a few seconds, Duque felt a little exhausted. Not only was his back drenched in sweat as if he had fallen into a pool of water, but his body was also unconsciously gasping for air. Chapter 982. If it was just a simple message, Nozdorma wouldn't have created such a terrifying mental strength test. After all, even though Duque had changed classes, his body and mental strength were still at the top of the pharaoh. Duque guessed that the only explanation was that the Bronze Dragon King's scale was both a message and a test. It was a test to see if the target had the minimum requirements to pass through time and space. Krasis couldn't hide the surprise on his face when he saw that Duke only sweated and took a deep breath to pass the test. What? Duque accepted Jaina's golden handkerchief as she wiped his sweat and smiled at Krasis. What terrifying willpower. I suddenly understand why you were able to forcefully convert the dark power that even demigods might not be able to withstand after taking Archimonde's fatal blow. As expected, Duque, you're the hero of the Alliance. There's a reason behind it. Krasis didn't have the slightest bit of flattery on his face. In fact, there wasn't even a trace of pretense in his respectful expression. The mental impact was indeed very strong. Duque nodded. This is a very dangerous mission, and there can't be more than 5 people. You and I will count as 2. You can pick the remaining 3. Duque wasn't surprised at all by Krasis's words. He turned his head and said, Ronan, you do it. Yes, teacher. Luoning bowed respectfully and touched the earthen yellow dragon scale. In the next second, Ronan screamed and fell to the ground, twitching non-stop. Everyone present wasn't an ordinary person, and they immediately realized how terrifying this mental test was. Ronan curled up into a ball on the ground, trembling non-stop as he let out indistinct groans. No. Kalimdor. Demon. Ancient god. He didn't say much, but every word made everyone tremble in fear. After half a minute, Ronan finally regained consciousness. His stomach cramped and he vomited on the spot. The sour and rancid smell of vomit assaulted her senses. Solarian, who was wearing a maid uniform, reacted quickly. With a wave of her hand, a well-timed frost spell froze the vomit, and immediately followed it up with an extremely precise icicle spell, blowing the vomit out of the tent. Ronan struggled to get up. He staggered and almost fell. Fortunately, Vanessa rushed forward to support him. Luoning's entire body seemed to collapse as he breathed heavily. He smiled bitterly. I'm sorry, teacher. I've embarrassed you. Duque shook his head with a smile. No. You're great. On the other side, Krasis was already applauding. I'm ashamed. It took me a whole minute to pass this test. It should be said that Ronan is indeed a hero who experienced the Battle of Mount Hyjal. Duque had the system to separate his spirit sea, but he was still almost hit, not to mention that Luo Ning had relied on his own spirit and willpower to survive. All right. There are 2 more spots. Duque seemed to be talking to himself. Then he quickly made a decision. Please inform Sar. I need him to send a strong warrior to help. Perhaps he did not want to admit it, but at this point in time, the warrior, mage, and priest iron triangle formed by warrior, mage, and priest was the standard. Without a strong warrior, the operation of the small team was not reliable. Of course, Krasis could transform into a dragon, but that was a tactical nuclear bomb that would not be used until the last moment. Because Krasis, who was not even born during the ancient war, had to go back to the past 10,000 years to acknowledge his ancestors. The last spot, I'll go. Servanas and Jaina stood up together, each with an expression of unwillingness to pass on the responsibility. Duque decisively rejected. I'll go because I have a secret deal with Nozdormu. I have no choice. Why are you 2 queens messing around? Especially you, Servanas. A Nastrian who betrayed Quell the Loss is still entrenched in Lordaeron. Why aren't you cleaning up the traitor? Why are you interfering in Nozdormu's matter? No. Queen Sylvanas still wanted to argue. There were even tears in the corner of her eyes. Just then, Jaina suddenly pulled Servanas back and shook her head. They suddenly understood. This was the general trend. Without world peace, there would be no peace in the country. Without a country, there would be no small family. They all understood this kind of interlocking relationship, but they could not accept it at the moment. They had just obtained the love they had been pursuing, but they immediately had to accept separation. This was indeed very difficult. Unfortunately, they had no choice. If they had fallen in love with an ordinary man, a farmer, perhaps they could hide in a place that was not affected by the flames of war and live peacefully. Their beloved Duque was a great hero of the alliance. A hero's glory and responsibility would always coexist. Jaina pursed her lips. Duque, you have to promise us that you will take care of yourself. It was rare for Duque to make a solemn promise. It's okay. I'm just going for a walk. It's not dangerous. I have proof. After saying this, he even winked at Krasis. Krasis understood on the spot. He nodded at the 2 queens to show that Duque was right. Yes. This time, they were indeed going back 10,000 years to stop the existence of evil from changing history. On the other hand, since the current Azeroth had not collapsed, didn't it mean that their mission to go back to the past was a success? If this was just Krasis' deduction, then Duque had absolute proof. He had definitely gone back to the past and done something unspeakable with Tyrant, causing her to act so out of character. I'm looking forward to it. Oh, no. This is so King confusing. What did I do? What did the future me do to Tyrant? Duque had a strange sense of anticipation. That kind of eagerness was like lighting a cigarette to calm down after a gas leak alarm had been set off. I digressed. But who should I choose as the 5th person? First of all, it could not be a holy knight. The power of a 5-man team was limited. Bringing a holy knight would be no different from throwing flashbangs in the middle of the night, telling all the demons that their enemies were here, and that they should come and kill them. At this point in time, the Alliance and the Horde did not seem to have any Radiant Moon warlocks or powerful shamans. In fact, the most ideal situation would be a hunter or rogue, because in Duque's memory, the 3 transmigrators had fallen directly into the forest. It would be better to have a hero with strong detection abilities. With the mentality of giving it a try, Duque let Vanessa and Lilith try. In the end, the one who passed was Vanessa. Chapter 983. After 50 seconds, Vanessa woke up. Duque was a little surprised, but also a little relieved. Sure enough, gold would shine? It seemed that Vanessa had inherited the tenacity of the original Vanessa in history. The little girl who had watched her father rise up because of injustice and eventually die, suffering the coldness of human nature, stood in front of the players more than a decade later, at this moment, looking at Lilith, who had fainted, and then at Vanessa, who was stubbornly struggling to get up on the ground. Duque suddenly felt that the Vanessa in history seemed to overlap with his former little maid. Master, did I pass? Her legs were shaking, and her face was pale. Bean-sized cold sweat gathered into small streams on her cheeks, neck, shoulders, collarbones, and other parts of her body. The sweat easily soaked the maid uniform on the outside, but it also revealed the tight-fitting leather armor under the maid uniform. Apart from Tyrande, who had seen Vanessa's strength, many people looked at Vanessa in shock. They didn't expect that even Duque's maid had broken through to the realm of heroes, and was an outstanding rogue. Gently touching Vanessa's head, Duque smiled gently. Well done. Although there are greater tests to come, at least you passed this time. Okay, go and rest. There was no first place in literature, and no second place in martial arts. This sentence was applicable in any world. After seeing Vanessa pass and Lilith fail, it seemed to have stimulated many people. Carponia was a little unconvinced, and she tactfully suggested to Kale that she wanted to try. Kaiser could only smile bitterly and convey this wish to Duque. Duque waved his hand. Go and try. Even if you don't participate in this mission, this kind of mental trial is a rare experience. In the end, the 4 heavenly kings around Kale, were all wiped out, dead dogs, and fainted. This made Kaiser feel a little embarrassed. In the end, he grumbled and insisted that he go. Originally, Duque thought that since Kaiser could kneel down to his father in the sun-chasing king court, his willpower should not be too strong. Obviously, Duque underestimated the prince's desire to prove himself hidden under the gentle appearance. Or rather, after the battle at Mount Hyjal, Kale had found his backbone. 42 seconds. It wasn't particularly good. It was later than Luo Ning, but faster than Vanessa. Kale, who was kneeling on the ground, looked like a victor. He raised his head high with a satisfied smile on his face. It seems that for some reason His Majesty Nosdormu didn't let me see the relevant content. He only tested me. Kale panted. Sorry, I can't tell you the reason, Krasis said. Duque knew the reason. Nosdormu was afraid that the elves would return to the ancient war 10,000 years ago, and become entangled with the night elves or the high elves. For example, if they killed Queen Azhara in advance to preserve the elves' ruling position, it would cause a huge deviation in history. Whoosh whoosh. Nosdormu, you underestimate me too much. I'm Duque, the disintegrator of history. Okay, when will we get Karazhan back, and when will we start? Duque asked. You can go back to the old site of Karazhan first and wait. When I go to the tribe to confirm the last candidate, and report the list of team members to His Majesty Nosdormu, the return of Karazhan can begin. Then you and your team have 3 days to prepare. Okay. Queen Sylvie was deeply conflicted. She wanted her sisters to return quickly, but she was also a little reluctant to part with Duque. She could only press her lips hard. An hour later, Orgrimmar. Outside this brand new unfinished city, there were huge arrow towers erected on almost all the hills. An orc saw a black duck coming from the horizon. Dragon. A red dragon. An orc sentry shouted. I've heard that the Dragonmaw clan used to ride red dragons to fly into the sky. Is that red dragon our companion Brock? Another orc asked. Brock snorted. The orc who asked was very young. During the battle at the Dark Portal, he was still a child, so he definitely didn't know how the orcs could ride on dragons. If the orcs conquered the red dragons forever, it would be a glory to be proud of. Unfortunately, all that was left was humiliation. Brock curled his lips. Gasco, you fool. If you want a dragon to fly around with an orc, the only way is for the orc to stay in the dragon's stomach. Gasco shrugged, looking like he didn't care. Orc customs were very interesting. They only respected shamans and orcs stronger than themselves. Evidently, he and the other orcs felt that Brock wasn't worthy of that magnificent equipment. That's right. Brock was also a warrior who had returned from the Battle of Mount Hyjal. Unfortunately, he'd always been by the Great Chief's side. He hadn't beheaded many demons, Nor had he lasted until the end of the battle against the Archerans. Brock had lost an arm, and he'd relied on human magic to recover and reattach it. He didn't fear any enemy, but time had worn away at his soul. Perhaps because of his hunchback, he looked a little shorter than Gasco. He didn't have much hair, but it was starting to turn white. His face was covered in scars and wrinkles. His eyes had long since lost the desire of his younger companions. When he met their doubtful and mistrustful gazes, he revealed a deep sense of indignation and sorrow. Brock wanted to prove himself. Crassus's arrival had alarmed all of Orgrimmar. He wasn't here to fight, so he turned into human form 500 meters away from the unfinished city gates and slowly walked over. Thrall met Crassus at once. When Crassus explained his purpose and handed over the dragon scale, Thrall was the first to touch it. 25 seconds, the best result apart from Duque. Thrall, who looked like he'd been fished out of water, muttered to himself and rubbed his chin. I think I know who to find, an outstanding warrior. He turned around. Brock. Call Brock here. Just like that, Brock was summoned. He passed the test in 33 seconds and accepted the mission. Thrall respected Brock very much. Even though many young orcs had looked down on him in the last battle, Thrall would never forget that Brock had been by his side ever since the battle for freedom in Golden Hold. Whether it was against fully armed humans, zombies, or the bloody battle with the centaurs after arriving in Duroder. You're tuning in to the Lime's Wuxia Whispers YouTube channel. We're so grateful for your support, and don't forget to subscribe to join us on this incredible journey through captivating stories. Your generosity through donations truly makes a world of difference, as it's the primary source of revenue that allows me to expand and enhance this channel for you. Thank you from the bottom of my heart for being a part of this adventure.